Still up this late? It's all right. Some nights refuse to settle no matter what you do. So let me walk with you through the quiet. I'll tell you 5 gentle stories, the kind you don't need to hold on to too tightly. The rhythm of the rain will take care of the rest. Story 1, The Neighbor Who Knocked in Patterns. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. That was how it started. Just a pattern on the wall, repeated once, twice, then silence. I thought it was pipes at first. Old building, bad plumbing, the kind of thing you learn to ignore when you're paying $800 a month for a studio in this city. But pipes don't knock in rhythm. Pipes don't pause between sequences like they're waiting for a response. I moved into the Greenwood Arms in January, right after my lease ran out on the place I'd shared with my ex. 29 years old, freshly single, starting over in a building that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. The apartment was small but functional, a bedroom that doubled as a living room, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, a bathroom with a shower that ran cold if someone on another floor flushed their toilet. The walls were the biggest problem, paper thin, the kind that let you hear every conversation, every television, every argument from the units around you. My first night, I lay in bed listening to the couple above me have a screaming match about whose turn it was to do dishes. Welcome home. The unit next to mine, 4B, was quiet though. I'd assumed it was empty at first. No footsteps, no music, no signs of life coming through that shared wall. The super had mentioned something about the previous tenant moving out suddenly, but I hadn't asked for details. Wasn't my business. The knocking started on my 3rd night. I was half asleep, drifting in that space between consciousness and dreams when I heard it. 3 knocks. A pause of maybe 2 seconds. 2 knocks. Another pause. 3 knocks. Then nothing. I opened my eyes, staring at the wall beside my bed. The wall that separated my apartment from 4B. The empty apartment. The apartment where nobody lived. I told myself I'd imagined it. Rolled over, pulled the blanket up, tried to fall back asleep. The pattern repeated. 3-2-3. Same rhythm, same pauses, like someone was standing on the other side of the wall, knuckles against the plaster, waiting. Hello? I said it out loud, feeling stupid, talking to a wall at 2 a.m. like a crazy person. The knocking stopped. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night, just lay there listening to the silence, waiting for it to come back, my heart beating too fast for rest. The next morning, I knocked on the door of 4B. No answer. I tried the handle, locked, pressed my ear against the wood and heard nothing. Not a footstep, not a breath, not a single sign that anyone was inside. I found the super in the basement, this heavy-set guy named Dominic who always seemed annoyed to be asked anything. Told him I was hearing knocking from the empty unit next door. He gave me a look. 4B ain't empty. What? Someone lives there. Older woman, been there longer than I have. He shrugged. Quiet type, keeps to herself. I've never seen her. Like I said, quiet type. I went back upstairs, stood in the hallway, stared at the door of 4B. No welcome mat, no decoration, no sign that anyone had entered or exited in days. But according to Dominic, someone lived there. Someone who knocked on walls at 2 a.m. in patterns that sounded almost like code. That night, I stayed awake. Sat on my bed with my back against the headboard, watching the wall, waiting. Around 1:30, rain started falling outside, pattering against my window in that soft, steady rhythm that usually helped me sleep. Not tonight. Tonight I was too wired, too focused on that stretch of painted plaster 3 feet from my face. At 2:17 a.m., the knocking came. 3, 2, 3. I held my breath, counted the seconds between sequences. 3, 2, 3. Same pattern, same pauses, exactly the same as before. I got up, walked to the wall, put my palm flat against it, feeling the vibration of the 3rd sequence as it came through. 3, 2, 3. And then, without really thinking about it, I knocked back 3 times, pause, 2 times, pause, 3 times. Silence, long, heavy silence. I stood there with my hand on the wall, heart pounding, wondering what the hell I was doing, communicating with a stranger through drywall in the middle of the night. This was insane. I was insane. Then the response came. Not the same pattern, something different. 4 knocks, pause, 1 knock, pause, 4 knocks, 4, 1, 4. I didn't know what it meant. Didn't know if it meant anything at all. But something about the change, the fact that she'd responded with a different sequence, made my skin prickle. I knocked again. 3, 2, 3, the original pattern. She answered. 4, 1, 4. We went back and forth like that for maybe 10 minutes. Me repeating her original pattern, her responding with the new one. A conversation in a language I didn't understand. Then, abruptly, the knocking stopped. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. I went back to bed but couldn't sleep. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain, thinking about the woman on the other side of the wall. The woman I'd never seen. The woman who knocked in patterns at 2 a.m. and seemed to expect a response. The next morning, I looked up Morse code. 323 didn't translate to anything I could find. Neither did 414. If it was a code, it wasn't one I recognized. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to tell me something. That the patterns meant something specific, something important, something I needed to understand before it was too late. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every sequence, every timestamp, every variation. The patterns came every night now, always starting around 2 a.m., always lasting exactly the same amount of time. And every night, I knocked back. I didn't know what I was saying. Didn't know what she was saying. But some part of me understood that this was a conversation, a desperate, coded conversation happening through inches of plaster and drywall, a conversation that was about to change everything. By the end of my second week, I had filled 11 pages with patterns. 323 appeared most often, almost always her opening sequence. 414 was her most common response to my knocks. But there were others, 55232, one long continuous knock that lasted maybe 15 seconds, followed by silence. I tried everything to decode them. Morse code, tap code, the knock code prisoners use. Nothing fit. The patterns didn't correspond to letters or numbers in any system I could find. Either she was using something I'd never heard of, or she was making it up as she went. Or she wasn't saying anything at all, just knocking, just noise. But I didn't believe that. The patterns were too consistent, too deliberate. There was meaning behind them. I just couldn't see it yet. I started watching the hallway, left my door cracked whenever I was home, positioned so I could see the entrance to 4B. Hours passed, days. I never saw her come or go, never heard footsteps in the corridor, never caught a glimpse of movement through the gap. The mail slots were in the lobby. I checked hers once, stuffed full of junk mail and flyers, weeks worth at least, like nobody had collected it in a very long time. I asked other tenants about her. The woman in 4A, directly across the hall, said she'd lived there for 3 years and had never once seen the occupant of 4B. The guy on the 5th floor said he'd heard rumors. An old woman who'd been there since the 70s, who never left her apartment, who had groceries delivered by a nephew nobody had ever met. Agoraphobic, probably, he said with a shrug. Mind your business. But I couldn't mind my business. Not when she knocked on my wall every night at 2 a.m. Not when the patterns felt like they were getting more urgent, more desperate, like she was trying to tell me something I was too stupid to understand. On the 15th night, the pattern changed completely. I was sitting on my bed, notebook ready, waiting for the usual 323 opener. The rain had stopped earlier that evening, leaving the city quiet, the only sound the occasional hiss of tires on wet pavement far below. At 2:14 a.m., the knocking started. 1 knock, pause, 1 knock, pause, 1 knock, 111, then faster, 333, then 111 again. My pen froze over the page. I knew that pattern. Everyone knew that pattern. SOS. She was knocking SOS. I scrambled off the bed, pressed my ear to the wall. The pattern repeated, faster now, more frantic. 111, 333, 111, the universal signal for distress, for help, for I am in danger and I need someone to save me. Hello? I shouted at the wall. Are you okay? Do you need help? The knocking stopped. Silence, that heavy, awful silence that felt like held breath. Then, very slowly, very deliberately, 414. The same response she always gave, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just hammered out a distress signal on our shared wall. I called the police, told them I was concerned about my neighbor, that I'd heard strange sounds, that I thought she might be in trouble. They sent someone around 45 minutes later, a bored-looking officer who knocked on the door of 4B while I watched from my doorway. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Ma'am, this is the police. We're doing a welfare check. Nothing. The officer turned to me. You said you hear her every night? Knocking, through the wall, always around 2 a.m. He gave me a look I'd seen before. The look people give you when they think you're wasting their time. Could be pipes. Old buildings make weird noises. It's not pipes, it's a pattern. She knocked SOS tonight. He sighed, wrote something in his notepad. I'll file a report. If you hear anything else concerning, call again. Then he left, and I was alone in the hallway, staring at the door of 4B, knowing with absolute certainty that something was wrong on the other side. I didn't sleep that night, just sat against the wall, ear pressed to the plaster, listening for any sound. Around 4 a.m., I heard something, not knocking, something else, crying, soft, muffled sobs coming through the wall. A woman crying in the apartment next door, the apartment no one ever entered or left, the apartment filled with weeks of uncollected mail. I'm here, I said to the wall. I can hear you. I'm trying to help. The crying stopped. Silence stretched out, heavy and final. Then, 323. Back to the original pattern, like the SOS had never happened, like the crying had never happened. I started researching the building the next day, found the address in old newspaper archives, property records, anything I could dig up. The Greenwood Arms had been built in 1952. Unit 4B had been occupied by the same tenant since 1971. 53 years. The same person in the same apartment for 53 years. I found her name in a rent dispute from 1989. Eleanor Vance. I searched for her online, found almost nothing. No social media, no public records after the mid-90s. Just a single photograph in a neighborhood newsletter from 1987 showing a woman in her 40s with graying hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She would be in her 80s now, if she was still alive. I printed the photograph, studied it under my desk lamp, tried to imagine this woman trapped in that apartment for decades, knocking on the walls in patterns nobody understood. Then I noticed something in the background of the photo, behind Eleanor, barely visible through a window, a figure, blurred, indistinct, but definitely there, someone standing in the apartment with her, someone whose hand rested on her shoulder in a grip that looked too tight to be affectionate. I zoomed in as far as the image quality would allow. The figure was male, tall. His face was turned away from the camera, but something about his posture, the way he loomed behind her, the way his fingers dug into her shoulder, made my stomach turn. That night, when the knocking came, I pressed my palm against the wall and spoke. Eleanor, is someone hurting you? The knocking stopped. The silence stretched. Then, for the first time, a new pattern. 2 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. 222. And somehow, in my gut, I knew exactly what it meant. Yes. I couldn't go to the police again. Not with nothing but knocking patterns and a blurry photograph from 1987. They'd already dismissed me once. Showing up with conspiracy theories about a woman being held captive would get me labeled as the building's crazy person, or worse. So I started building a case. I went back to the archives, searched for everything I could find about Eleanor Vance. Found a marriage certificate from 1968, Eleanor Vance to Richard Vance. A divorce filing in 1973, 2 years after she'd moved into the Greenwood Arms. The divorce was never finalized. The paperwork just stopped. Richard Vance. I searched for him next. He'd been a contractor, owned a small construction company that went under in the early 80s. After that, the records got sparse. No new businesses, no property purchases, no tax filings I could access. Just a single address listed on a 1995 utility bill, the Greenwood Arms, Unit 4B. He'd moved in with her, or moved in on her. The woman who'd filed for divorce and never finished the paperwork. The woman who'd lived in the same apartment for 53 years and never seemed to leave. I thought about the figure in the photograph, the hand gripping her shoulder, the way she smiled like someone who'd forgotten what happiness felt like. That night, I developed a system. 1 knock for no, 2 knocks for yes. I tapped it out on the wall, explaining as I went, hoping she could hear me, hoping she understood. Eleanor, can you hear me? Knock once for no, twice for yes. 2 knocks. My heart was pounding. Is someone keeping you in that apartment? 2 knocks. Is it Richard? A long pause. Then, very softly, 2 knocks. I pressed my forehead against the wall, fighting the urge to put my fist through it. I'm going to help you. I'm going to get you out of there. Do you understand? 2 knocks. Is he there right now? Is Richard in the apartment with you? Silence. Long, terrible silence. Then 1 knock. No. When does he come back? No response. The system didn't account for complex answers. I tried again. Does he come every day? 1 knock. Every few days? 2 knocks. Is he coming tomorrow? 2 knocks. I sat back, mind racing. He wasn't there now, but he'd be back tomorrow. That gave me less than 24 hours to figure out how to help her. 24 hours to find evidence, to convince someone with authority that an 80-year-old woman was being held prisoner by her ex-husband in the apartment next to mine. I barely slept. Spent the night researching Richard Vance, looking for anything that might help. Found an arrest record from 1976, assault charges that were later dropped. A restraining order filed by Eleanor in 1974, expired and never renewed. A pattern of violence that had started decades ago and apparently never stopped. The next morning I went to the building manager's office. Not Dominic the super, his boss, a woman named Patricia who handled the administrative side. I told her I had concerns about the tenant in 4B. Told her about the knocking, the uncollected mail, the welfare check that had gone nowhere. Patricia pulled up Eleanor's file on her computer, frowned at the screen. The rent's always paid on time, she said. Cashier's check, first of every month. No complaints, no maintenance requests. When's the last time anyone actually saw her? Patricia scrolled through the records. Her frown deepened. There's no record of any in-person contact. The lease renewal forms are always mailed back, signed, but... She looked up at me. This goes back years, decades. Someone's keeping her in there, I said. Her ex-husband. I think he's been holding her prisoner. Patricia's expression shifted. I saw the moment she decided I was crazy, the same way the cop had, the same way everyone did when you tried to explain something that sounded impossible. I'll look into it, she said, the same nothing words they always used. I went back to my apartment, waited, watched the hallway through the crack in my door. At 6:47 p.m., I saw him for the first time. He came up the stairs, not the elevator, the stairs, moving with the careful gait of someone who didn't want to be noticed. Tall, stooped, maybe late 70s or early 80s. Gray hair, thin and greasy, combed over a spotted scalp. He was carrying a plastic bag from a grocery store. He stopped at the door of 4B, pulled out a key, unlocked it, and just before he stepped inside, he turned his head and looked directly at my door. I jerked back from the gap, heart slamming, breath frozen in my throat. Had he seen me? Had he noticed the crack, the shadow of movement behind it? I heard the door of 4B open and close, the click of a deadbolt sliding home. Then nothing. Silence from the apartment that had been knocking on my wall for weeks. I pressed my ear to the plaster, listened with everything I had. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving through the apartment. A voice. Male, low, words I couldn't make out. Then another voice. Female, Eleanor. Speaking for the first time, saying something I couldn't understand, her tone flat and defeated and so quiet I could barely hear it. Then a sound that made my blood turn to ice. A slap, sharp and brutal, followed by a cry, quickly muffled, like a hand had clamped over her mouth. I stood there, frozen, listening to something I couldn't see and couldn't stop. Listening to a woman being hurt 3 feet away from me, separated by nothing but drywall and decades of silence. I wanted to break down the door, wanted to call the police again, make them listen, make them understand. But I knew how that would go. My word against his. No evidence of a crime, just a crazy neighbor with theories about knocking patterns. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that would make them act, and I knew exactly how I was going to get it. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and pressed the microphone against the wall. Whatever happened next, I was going to document every second of it. I recorded for 3 hours that night. Most of it was silence, the thick, suffocating quiet of a space where someone has learned not to make noise, but scattered throughout were sounds that made me sick. Footsteps. A television turned on loud, then off again, the creak of floorboards, and twice more, that sharp crack of flesh against flesh, followed by muffled whimpering. He was hurting her, methodically, casually, the way someone hurts a person they've been hurting for decades, like it was routine, like it was nothing. I saved the recording, made 3 backup copies, emailed one to myself, uploaded another to cloud storage, kept the original on my phone. Evidence, undeniable evidence. The next morning, I went back to the police station. Different officer this time, a woman, younger, who actually looked at me when I spoke. I played her the recording. Her expression changed within the first 30 seconds. You recorded this through your wall? The apartments share a wall. You can hear everything. I leaned forward. That's a woman being hit. That's assault. You have to do something. She listened to the whole thing, made notes, asked me questions about Eleanor, about Richard, about everything I'd found. When I showed her the photograph from 1987, the arrest record, the unfiled divorce, she stopped writing and just stared at the file I'd compiled. You did all this research yourself? Nobody else was going to do it. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. 2 hours later, I was standing in the hallway outside 4B with 3 police officers and a detective. They knocked on the door, loud, authoritative, the kind of knock that doesn't accept silence as an answer. Police, open the door. Nothing. They knocked again. We have reason to believe someone in this residence is in danger. Open the door or we'll force entry. I heard movement inside. Shuffling. A voice, Richard's voice, saying something I couldn't make out. The deadbolt clicked. The door opened 6 inches, stopped by a chain. Through the gap, I saw him, Richard Vance, older than the blurred figure in the photograph, but unmistakably the same man. Those deep-set eyes, that thin mouth pressed into a line of contempt. Can I help you? His voice was calm, pleasant even. The voice of someone who'd been hiding in plain sight for 50 years. Sir, we've received reports of a disturbance. We need to speak with Eleanor Vance. My wife isn't feeling well. She's resting. We need to see her now. A pause. Richard's eyes flicked past the officers, found me standing at the back of the group. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Understanding. He knew I was the one who'd called them. Just a moment. The door closed. I heard the chain slide free. When it opened again, Richard stepped aside to reveal the apartment beyond. And there she was, Eleanor. She was sitting in a chair by the window, hands folded in her lap, perfectly still. 82 years old, according to the records, but she looked older, frail, hollow. Her hair was white and thin, her skin papery and bruised in places she'd tried to cover with long sleeves. She didn't look at the officers, didn't look at Richard, just stared at the floor with eyes that had stopped seeing anything a long time ago. "Ma'am?" The detective approached slowly, crouching to meet her eye level. "Eleanor, are you all right?" She didn't respond, didn't move, didn't acknowledge that anyone had spoken. "She has dementia," Richard said smoothly. "Has for years. Doesn't speak much anymore." But I'd heard her speak. Through the wall, just last night, I'd heard her voice, flat and defeated, but present, aware. "Eleanor." I pushed past the officers before anyone could stop me, knelt in front of her chair, put myself in her line of sight. "Eleanor, it's me, from next door, the one who knocks back." Something flickered in her eyes, a spark of recognition, buried under layers of fear and resignation. "You can tell them," I said. "You can tell them everything. He can't hurt you anymore." Richard's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy, tight. The same grip I'd seen in the photograph, fingers digging in with controlled violence. "I think you should leave," he said. "You're upsetting my wife. Get your hand off me." "Sir," one of the officers stepped forward. "Step back, please." Richard released me. But his eyes never left my face, cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who'd spent decades controlling someone and couldn't stand the thought of losing that control. The detective was still crouched in front of Eleanor. "Ma'am, I need you to tell me if you're being hurt, if someone is keeping you here against your will. Can you do that?" Silence. Eleanor's hands trembled in her lap. Her eyes darted to Richard, just for a second, but long enough for the detective to notice. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to wait in the hallway. This is my home. Now, sir." 2 officers escorted Richard out. He went without resistance, but I could feel his rage, this contained, simmering fury that filled the hallway like heat from a fire. He stood against the opposite wall, arms crossed, watching through the open door. Without him in the room, something changed in Eleanor. Her shoulders dropped, her breathing steadied. She lifted her head just slightly and looked at the detective. "He won't let me leave." Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked from disuse. 53 years. He won't let me leave. The detective's expression hardened. "Ma'am, would you like to come with us? We can take you somewhere safe." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, a tiny, trembling motion, like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "You're lying." Richard's voice cut through the hallway. "She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." "Sir, you need to be quiet." "She's my wife. You can't just take her. She's a victim." I was shouting now, weeks of rage finally boiling over. 53 years you've kept her locked in here. 53 years of hitting her, controlling her, making her disappear. It's over. Do you understand? It's over. Richard lunged at me. I didn't see it coming. 1 second he was against the wall. The next his hands were around my throat, slamming me backward into the doorframe. His face was inches from mine, twisted with fury, all the calm control stripped away to reveal something feral underneath. "You don't know anything," he snarled. "You don't know what she is, what she made me do." The officers pulled him off, forced him to the ground, cuffed him while he screamed. Incoherent things, accusations, justifications that made no sense. I leaned against the wall, gasping, hand pressed to my bruised throat. And from inside the apartment, I heard something I'd never heard before. Eleanor was laughing, soft, broken, disbelieving laughter, the sound of someone who'd just realized they were free. Richard Vance was charged with unlawful imprisonment, assault, and 53 counts of domestic violence, one for each year he'd kept her trapped in that apartment. The prosecutor said it was one of the longest captivity cases in the state's history. A woman held prisoner by her husband for over half a century, right in the middle of a city, and nobody had noticed. Nobody except the neighbor who knocked back. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified twice, once about the patterns, once about what I'd heard through the wall. Eleanor testified too, via video link from the care facility where she was recovering. Her voice was stronger than I'd ever heard it, steady, clear. She described everything, how Richard had isolated her from her family, how he'd convinced her that no one would believe her if she tried to leave, how he'd controlled every aspect of her life until she'd forgotten there was anything else. He told me the world had forgotten I existed, she said, and after a while, I believed him. Richard was convicted on all counts, sentenced to life in prison. He was 81 years old. He'd die behind bars, the same way he'd forced Eleanor to live for decades. Some people called it justice. I'm not sure there's a word for what it actually was. After the trial, I visited Eleanor at her facility. It was a nice place, bright, clean, full of people who actually cared about her well-being. She had a room with a window that looked out over a garden. First time in 53 years, she'd had a view of something green. She was sitting in a chair by that window when I came in, different from the hollow woman I'd seen in the apartment. There was color in her cheeks now, light in her eyes. She smiled when she saw me, a real smile, the kind that reaches all the way. "The man who knocks," she said. I sat down across from her. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm waking up from a very long dream." She looked out the window, watching a bird hop across the grass. I'd forgotten what trees looked like. Isn't that strange? 53 years, and I'd forgotten the color of leaves. We talked for a while, about nothing important, the weather, the food at the facility, the nurses she liked, and the ones she didn't. Normal conversation, the kind of thing she'd been denied for half a century. Eventually, I asked the question I'd been carrying since the beginning. The patterns, 323, 414, what did they mean? Eleanor was quiet for a moment, her hands folded in her lap, a habit I realized from years of making herself small. "My mother taught me when I was a girl," she said. "A game we played. 3 knocks for 'I'm here,' 2 for 'Are you there?' 3 more for 'I'm waiting.' 3, 2, 3, 'I'm here. Are you there? I'm waiting.' And 414? That was mine. I made it up after Richard." She trailed off, looked back at the window. 4 for please, 1 for help, 4 for me. Please help me. I sat there, feeling the weight of those patterns settle over me. All those nights, lying in bed, listening to a woman beg for help in a language nobody understood, a language she'd invented because she had no other way to speak. "I knocked every night for years," Eleanor said softly. "Different apartments, different neighbors. Nobody ever knocked back." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were bright with tears. "Until you." I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain that I'd almost ignored it too, almost convinced myself it was pipes or imagination or anything other than what it was. "I'm sorry it took so long," I finally said. "I'm sorry nobody listened sooner." Eleanor reached out and took my hand. Her grip was fragile, bones like bird wings, but steady. "You listened," she said. "That's what matters. You listened, and you didn't stop." I visited her every week after that, watched her slowly come back to life, learning to walk outside again, to talk to strangers, to exist in a world that had changed beyond recognition since 1971. She was amazed by smartphones, delighted by streaming services, bewildered by the internet, but fascinated too. "So much I missed," she said once, shaking her head. "So many years." She died 8 months later, peacefully, in her sleep, in that room with the window overlooking the garden. The doctors said her body had just been through too much, Decades of stress and malnutrition and abuse had taken a toll that couldn't be undone. But she died free. She died knowing what trees looked like again. She died with her own name, her own voice, her own life finally returned to her. I still live in the Greenwood Arms, still sleep in the same bed, against the same wall. Unit 4B has a new tenant now, a young woman who plays music too loud and has friends over on weekends. Normal sounds, living sounds. Sometimes, late at night, I still listen. Press my ear to the wall out of habit, waiting for patterns that don't come anymore. And sometimes, when the building is quiet and the rain is falling outside, I knock 3 times, pause, 2 times, pause, 3 times. I'm here. Are you there? I'm waiting. Nobody answers. The wall stays silent, but I keep knocking anyway, just in case someone on the other side needs to know that they're not alone, that someone is listening, that even through inches of plaster and years of silence, a person can reach out and find another person reaching back. That's what saved Eleanor. Not the police, not the evidence, not the trial. Just 2 strangers knocking on a wall in the middle of the night, refusing to let the silence win. If you hear something strange through your walls, a pattern, a rhythm, something that sounds almost like a message, don't ignore it. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Knock back. You might be the only one who does. Story 2. The photo on my phone that had someone behind me. I almost deleted it. That's the thing that haunts me most. I almost swiped left and erased the only warning I was ever going to get. It was a Thursday evening, nothing special. I'd just gotten home from work, kicked off my shoes, collapsed onto my bed with that end-of-day exhaustion that makes everything feel heavy. My apartment was quiet. My roommate was out of town for the week, visiting family, so I had the place to myself. I remember thinking how nice that was, how peaceful. I was scrolling through my phone, killing time before I mustered the energy to make dinner. Opened the camera app to take a selfie. Just a stupid, lazy picture from my private story. Hair messy, no makeup. The kind of photo you send to close friends with a caption about being tired. I held up the phone, found my angle, snapped the picture, and then I looked at it. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The photo was normal. Me, lying on my bed, the pillows behind me, the lamp on my nightstand casting warm light across the frame. Everything exactly as it should be, except for the shape in the doorway. My bedroom door was open. I always left it open when I was home alone, some leftover habit from childhood, needing to see the hallway. In the photo, the doorway was visible just over my shoulder, a rectangle of darker shadow leading to the rest of the apartment. And standing in that shadow, barely visible but undeniably there, was a person. I sat up so fast I nearly dropped my phone, stared at the screen, zooming in with trembling fingers. The shape was blurry. The camera had focused on my face, leaving the background soft, but I could make out the outline. Shoulders, a head, the suggestion of arms hanging at their sides. Someone standing in my doorway, watching me. I looked up. The doorway was empty. Just shadows. Just the dark hallway and the distant glow of the living room lamp I'd left on. No one there. No movement. No sound except my own breathing, suddenly loud in my ears. I looked back at the photo. The figure was still there. Still standing. Still watching. I got up. Walked through the entire apartment with my phone flashlight on, checking every room, every closet, behind every door. The front door was locked, deadbolt engaged, chain fastened. The windows were closed. There was no one there. I was alone. I went back to my bedroom and looked at the photo again. The figure hadn't moved, hadn't changed. It was just there, frozen in pixels. A person who shouldn't exist in a place where no one had been standing. I told myself it was pareidolia, that thing where your brain sees faces and shapes in random patterns. The shadow in the doorway had hit at just the right angle, and my mind had filled in the blanks, turned nothing into something. It happens all the time. It's why people see Jesus in toast and faces in clouds. I deleted the photo, made dinner, watched TV until I was too tired to think. Went to bed with all the lights on, which I told myself was just because I was in a weird mood, not because I was scared. I woke up at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. Half asleep, not really thinking. Grabbed my phone off the nightstand out of habit, shuffled down the hall, did what I needed to do. On the way back to bed, I stopped in the hallway. Something felt off. That prickling sensation at the back of your neck, the one that tells you you're being watched even when you know you're alone. I turned around. Nothing there. Just the dark apartment, the shapes of furniture barely visible in the ambient light from the street. I raised my phone, opened the camera. I don't know why, some instinct, some need to prove to myself that the earlier photo had been a fluke. I took a picture of the hallway. The flash went off, blinding me for a second. I blinked away the spots, looked at the screen. The hallway was empty in the photo, just walls and doors and shadows. But in the mirror at the end of the hall, the full-length mirror I used to check my outfit before work, there was a reflection that shouldn't have been there. A figure, standing behind me, close, so close that if it had been real, I would have felt its breath on my neck. I spun around, nothing, empty air. The hallway stretched behind me, dark and silent and completely vacant. I looked at the photo again. The figure in the mirror was clearer this time. Not just a shape, I could see details now. Long hair, dark, hanging over a face I couldn't quite make out. Shoulders hunched forward, arms reaching toward me, fingers extended, almost touching the back of my head. I ran to my bedroom, locked the door, sat on my bed with my back against the wall, phone clutched in both hands, staring at that image until my eyes burned. It wasn't pareidolia. It wasn't a glitch. There was someone in my apartment. Someone the camera could see, but I couldn't. Someone who was getting closer. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. Just sat there, watching the door, listening to the silence, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The apartment stayed quiet. The sun came up, filling the rooms with ordinary daylight, making everything feel normal again. But I couldn't stop thinking about that figure, the way it had been standing in my doorway in the first photo, distant, watching, the way it had been right behind me in the second, close enough to touch. If I took another photo, where would it be? I didn't want to find out. Told myself I wouldn't take any more pictures, wouldn't use the camera, wouldn't give it another chance to show me something I didn't want to see. But some part of me knew that wasn't really a choice. Some part of me understood that whatever was happening, it wasn't going to stop just because I stopped looking. The camera wasn't creating the figure. It was just showing me what was already there. I lasted 2 days before I took another photo. It wasn't intentional. My boss asked for a picture of a document I'd been working on, some spreadsheet she needed for a meeting. I opened the camera, pointed it at my desk, snapped the photo without thinking. Then I saw it. The figure was in the window reflection behind my monitor, clearer than before. I could see the shape of its face now, pale, wrong somehow, features that didn't quite line up the way a human face should. It was closer than the mirror had been, close enough that it seemed to be looking over my shoulder, reading the same document I was photographing. I deleted the photo immediately, told my boss I'd email the spreadsheet instead. Spent the rest of the day fighting the urge to look behind me, to check every reflective surface, to confirm that I was alone in my cubicle even though I knew I wasn't. That night, I tried to tell my roommate. She'd gotten back from her trip, and we were sitting on the couch eating takeout, and I thought maybe if I said it out loud, it would sound less crazy. Something weird's been happening with my phone, I started. Like what? When I take photos, there's someone in them. Someone who isn't there. She laughed. Not mean, just confused. Like a glitch? A ghost in the machine? I don't know what it is, but it's in every photo now, and it's getting closer. She took my phone, scrolled through my camera roll, frowned at the screen. There's nothing here, just normal pictures. I grabbed the phone back. She was right. The photos I'd taken were there, but they were clean, normal. No figure in the doorway, no shape in the mirror, no face in the window reflection. They'd changed. The evidence was gone. I swear there was something there, I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. My roommate gave me that look, concern mixed with skepticism, the expression people wear when they think you're losing it but don't want to say so. Maybe you're just stressed. You've been working a lot lately. Sometimes our brains play tricks on us when we're tired. I nodded, agreed, let her believe I'd imagined it. But I hadn't imagined it, and now whatever was in those photos knew I'd tried to tell someone. That night, I woke up to my phone buzzing. A notification, my camera app had opened on its own. The screen showed the live viewfinder, pointed at the ceiling above my bed. And in the corner of the frame, just at the edge of visibility, a hand was reaching into view. I threw the phone across the room, heard it hit the wall, clatter to the floor. Lay there in the dark, breathing too fast, staring at the ceiling I couldn't see. The phone screen glowed from where it had landed, still on, still showing the camera view. I didn't look at it until morning. When I finally checked, the camera app was closed. The phone was fine. No cracks, no damage, nothing to suggest I'd hurled it at the wall in a panic. And in my photo gallery, there was a new picture. I hadn't taken it. I'd been asleep. But there it was, a photo captured at 3:33 a.m. according to the timestamp. It was a picture of me, sleeping, taken from directly above, like someone had been standing over my bed, holding my phone, pointing it down at my face. And at the edge of the frame, just barely visible, was a hand, pale, long-fingered, holding the phone that had taken the picture, its hand, taking a photo of me with my own phone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just sat there on my bed, staring at that image, at the proof that something had been in my room while I slept, something that had picked up my phone, something that had wanted me to see. I called in sick to work, spent the day researching, ghosts, hauntings, digital anomalies, anything that might explain what was happening. I found forums full of people who'd experienced similar things, photos with figures that shouldn't be there, images that changed after you looked at them, cameras that seemed to capture things the human eye couldn't see. Most of the explanations were useless. Lens flares, double exposures, pareidolia, that word again. Like naming something made it less terrifying. But buried in one thread, I found a post that made my blood run cold. "It's not a ghost," the user had written. "Ghosts don't get closer. Ghosts don't take pictures. What you're seeing is something that's attached to you, something that's been following you, waiting for you to notice it. The camera doesn't create it. It just lets you see what's already there. And once you see it, once you acknowledge it exists, it can finally reach you." The post was 3 years old. The user hadn't been active since. I scrolled through their history, looking for updates, looking for some sign of what had happened to them. The last thing they'd posted was a photo, their living room, ordinary and mundane, except for the figure standing directly behind the camera, facing outward, looking through the screen, looking at whoever was viewing the image. I slammed my laptop shut. That night, I covered every camera in my apartment, taped over my phone's lenses, put a blanket over my laptop, refused to look at any reflective surface, mirrors, windows, the black screen of the TV. I thought if I couldn't see it, maybe it couldn't reach me. I was wrong. At 3:33 a.m., I woke up to the sound of tapping, soft, rhythmic, coming from somewhere nearby. It was coming from under the tape on my phone's camera. Tap, 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 like something was knocking, like something was asking to be let back in. I got rid of the phone, didn't trade it in, didn't sell it. I drove to a bridge at 4 a.m. and threw it into the river, watched it disappear into the black water, swallowed by the current, gone forever. I stood there in the cold, rain misting against my face, and I told myself it was over. The phone was the problem. Without it, the thing couldn't see me, couldn't reach me, couldn't take pictures while I slept. I bought a new phone the next day. Basic model, no frills, just calls and texts. Didn't even set up the camera app. Kept it in my pocket and didn't look at the screen more than I had to. For 3 days, nothing happened. No figures in doorways, no shapes in mirrors, no tapping in the middle of the night. I started to believe I'd been right. It had been tied to the phone, and now the phone was gone, and so was the thing that lived inside it. Then my roommate showed me a photo she'd taken. We were in the kitchen making dinner together, and she'd snapped a picture of the pasta she was cooking, one of those casual shots people take for social media. She turned the screen toward me to show off her culinary skills. "Look how good this turned out." She stopped mid-sentence, stared at her phone with her mouth open. What the hell? I looked at the screen. The pasta was there, steam rising from the pot, everything normal and appetizing, except for the reflection in the stainless steel pot lid. A face. Not mine. Not my roommate's. A pale, distorted face with features that didn't quite align, staring out from the curved metal surface like it was pressed against glass from the other side. "Is that..." My roommate's voice was shaking. "Is that what you were talking about? The thing in your photos?" I couldn't answer, couldn't speak, because the face in the reflection wasn't looking at the camera. It was looking at me. My roommate deleted the photo, then she deleted it from her recently deleted folder, then she turned off her phone entirely and shoved it in a drawer. "What is that thing?" she whispered. "What's happening?" "I don't know." The words came out hollow. I thought getting rid of my phone would stop it. "It's not your phone." She was backing away from me, I realized, putting distance between us. "It's you. It's following you." She was right. I'd known it on some level, but I hadn't wanted to admit it. The phone had just been a window. Destroying it hadn't destroyed what was on the other side. It had just closed one opening, and now the thing was finding other ways to look through. I left that night, packed a bag, told my roommate I was staying with my sister for a few days. She didn't argue, didn't ask me to stay. I saw the relief in her eyes when I walked out the door. My sister lived an hour outside the city, a small house in a quiet neighborhood. I hadn't told her what was happening, just said I needed a break, needed to get away from the apartment for a while. She welcomed me without questions, made up the guest room, poured me wine and let me sit in silence. I thought maybe distance would help. Maybe if I got far enough away from where it started, the thing would lose track of me. Stay behind in the apartment, in the city, in whatever dark corner it had crawled out of. I was wrong. The first night at my sister's house, I woke up to her screaming. I ran to her room, found her sitting up in bed, phone clutched in her hands, face white as paper. She was staring at the screen, hyperventilating, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What is it? What's wrong?" She turned the phone toward me. It was a photo of her bedroom, taken just seconds ago, according to the timestamp. The shot showed her bed, her nightstand, the window with the curtains drawn. And standing at the foot of the bed, inches from where she was sleeping, was the figure. Not a reflection this time, not a shape in a doorway. It was fully visible now, standing in the open, close enough to touch her. The long, dark hair, the wrong face, the arms hanging at its sides, fingers curled like it was about to reach for something. For her, for my sister, who had nothing to do with any of this. "It's not me it wants," I said. The words felt like ash in my mouth. "It's anyone near me, anyone who might see." My sister was crying, shaking. "Get out. You need to get out." "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I drove through the night. Didn't know where I was going, just needed to move, needed to put distance between myself and everyone I cared about. The thing wasn't just attached to me, it was spreading, infecting anyone who got close, anyone whose camera might catch a glimpse. Around 3 a.m., I pulled into a rest stop, empty except for a few semis idling in the truck parking. I sat in my car, engine running, heater blasting against the February cold, and I tried to think. There had to be a way to stop it, to break whatever connection it had formed. The forum post had said acknowledging it, let it reach me. Maybe there was a way to unacknowledge it, to deny its existence so completely that it faded back into whatever void it had come from. I pulled out my new phone, the basic one, the safe one. I opened the camera app. I don't know why. Some desperate need to see it, to understand what I was dealing with. Some stupid hope that maybe it had given up, moved on, found someone else to haunt. I pointed the camera at the passenger seat. Empty. I pointed it at the back seat through the rearview mirror. Empty. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Maybe it was over. Maybe. The phone buzzed in my hand. A notification. New photo saved to gallery. I hadn't taken a photo, hadn't pressed the button. But there it was. A new image in my camera roll. Timestamp 3:33 a.m. It was a picture of me, sitting in my car, taken from the passenger seat, and in the reflection of my eyes, tiny, barely visible, but unmistakably there, was the figure. Inside the car, with me. I looked at the passenger seat, empty, but I could feel it now. A presence, a weight in the air, the sensation of being watched from inches away by something I couldn't see, something that had finally gotten close enough to touch. I didn't scream, didn't run. There was nowhere to go. It was in the car with me, inches away, separated by nothing but the barrier between what cameras could see and what human eyes couldn't. I sat very still, watched the fog of my breath in the cold air, and then, slowly, I raised my phone again. "What do you want?" I said it out loud. Felt insane doing it. But I was past caring about sanity, past caring about anything except understanding what was happening and finding a way to make it stop. I took a photo of the passenger seat. The image showed the empty seat, the dark window beyond, the parking lot lights casting orange streaks across the glass. And sitting in the seat, clear as day, was the figure, a woman. I could see that now. Young, maybe my age, maybe younger. Her hair was long and dark and matted, hanging over a face that was almost human but not quite right. The proportions were off. The eyes were too large, too dark, like holes punched through to somewhere else. Her mouth was open slightly, lips cracked and gray. She was looking directly at the camera, directly at me. I took another photo, then another. Rapid fire, filling my screen with images, each one showing her in a slightly different position, turning toward me, leaning closer, reaching out. In the final photo, her face filled the entire frame, close enough that I could see the texture of her skin. Not skin, I realized, but something else. Something that looked like skin had been stretched over a shape that wasn't meant to wear it. Her mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear. I looked up from the phone. The passenger seat was empty, but I could feel her breath on my neck. Cold, wrong. The exhalation of something that had never needed to breathe. "What do you want?" I said again, louder this time. My phone buzzed. A new photo in my gallery. I opened it. It was text, not typed, written by hand, scratched into what looked like a fogged-up window. 3 words, barely legible. "See me completely." I stared at the message. See me completely. Not just glimpses and reflections, not just shapes in doorways. She wanted me to look at her, really look, without the barrier of a lens. But I couldn't see her, not with my eyes, only through cameras, unless I thought about the forum post. Once you acknowledge it exists, it can finally reach you. I'd acknowledged it. I'd seen it. I'd spent days obsessing over it, giving it attention, feeding it with my fear. What if that was what she needed? Not just acknowledgement, but acceptance. Not just seeing her in photos, but choosing to see her for real. I didn't know what would happen if I did that. Didn't know if she would disappear or if she would become solid, real, able to do whatever she'd been trying to do since that first photo in my bedroom. But I couldn't keep running, couldn't keep spreading this thing to everyone I loved. If seeing her completely was the only way to end this, then I had to try. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and then I did something I can't fully explain. I stopped resisting, stopped telling myself she wasn't real, stopped clinging to the rational explanations, the pareidolia, the glitches and anomalies. I let myself believe. When I opened my eyes, she was sitting in the passenger seat. Not a photo, not a reflection. Her, real and solid and inches away, her two large eyes fixed on my face, her wrong mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. I didn't scream. Somehow, I didn't scream. "Who are you?" My voice was barely a whisper. She tilted her head. That same movement I'd seen in so many photos. Mechanical, inhuman. "I was like you." Her voice was layered, like multiple people speaking slightly out of sync. "I saw something I shouldn't have seen. I took a photo, and something looked back. And then I ran, and I hid, and I tried to make it stop." "What happened to you?" "I deleted all the photos, every single one. I smashed my phone, threw away my computer, removed every camera from my life." Her smile widened, cracked lips splitting further. "But you can't delete something that's already inside you. You can't unsee what you've seen. So you became this." I stopped existing. Nobody could see me anymore. Not cameras, not mirrors, not human eyes. I was erased. She leaned closer, and I could smell her now. Something old and stale, like a room that had been closed up for decades. But erasure isn't death. It's worse. You're still there, still conscious, but nobody can perceive you. Nobody knows you exist. You're trapped in the space between seen and unseen, forever. My throat was tight. "And now you want... what? To be seen again?" "I want out." Her hand moved toward me, those long fingers reaching for my face. "And the only way out is through. Someone has to see me completely, has to take my place in the between." I understood then. This wasn't a haunting. It wasn't a curse or a demon or any of the things I'd imagined. It was a trap, a prison, and she needed someone else to fill it so she could escape. "If I let you in," I said slowly, "what happens to me?" "You become what I was, unseen, unheard, trapped in photographs and reflections, reaching out to anyone who might notice you, trying to find someone else to take your place." She was inches from my face now. "It might take years, decades, but eventually someone will see you, and you'll do to them what I'm doing to you." I thought about running, thought about smashing the phone, getting out of the car, fleeing into the night. But she'd already tried that. It hadn't worked. I thought about accepting, letting her take my place, spending eternity in the between, hoping someone would eventually set me free. Then I thought about something else, something she'd said that didn't quite fit. "You deleted all your photos, every single one." "But I didn't." She hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty in those two dark eyes. "I still have them," I said. "The photos of you, the evidence that you exist. And if I'm the only one who can see you, if seeing you completely is what lets you out..." I grabbed my phone, opened the gallery, found every photo with her in it. "Then maybe keeping you seen is what keeps you trapped." Her face twisted, that almost smile becoming something else, something furious. "No, you can't." I hit upload, sent every photo to the cloud, to social media, to everyone in my contacts, blasted them out into the world, into servers and screens and millions of potential eyes. "Let's see how many people can see you now." She screamed, a sound that wasn't sound, that vibrated in my bones and made my vision go white. And then she was gone. I sat in my car until sunrise, hands shaking, phone clutched against my chest, waiting for her to come back, to materialize in the passenger seat, to punish me for whatever I'd just done. She didn't. The parking lot filled with early morning travelers, truckers getting coffee, families stretching their legs, normal people doing normal things, completely unaware that something impossible had just happened 20 feet away. I checked my phone. The photos had uploaded, all of them. Already the notifications were rolling in, confused comments, laughing emojis, people asking if this was some kind of ARG or horror project. Nobody believed they were real, but they'd seen them. That was what mattered. I drove home, took a shower, slept for 14 hours straight, the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who'd been running on fear and adrenaline for days. When I woke up, the sun was setting and my phone had 247 notifications. The photos had gone viral. Not massively viral, not millions of views, but enough. They'd been shared on horror subreddits, paranormal forums, conspiracy Twitter. People were analyzing them, looking for evidence of editing, debating whether the figure was CGI or practical effects or genuine supernatural phenomena. Thousands of people had looked at her. Thousands of eyes seeing her face, acknowledging her existence. I thought about what she'd said, that she'd been erased because nobody could see her, that she'd been trapped in the between because she'd deleted every photo, removed every trace of herself from the visible world by doing the opposite, by spreading her image everywhere. I'd done something she hadn't anticipated. I'd made her visible to everyone, not trapped in the space between seen and unseen, but fully, undeniably seen by thousands of strangers who would never forget that face. Maybe that was enough to break the trap. Or maybe I'd just made things worse in ways I couldn't understand. The first few weeks were quiet. I went back to work, moved to a new apartment, couldn't stay in the old one, couldn't look at that bedroom doorway without remembering the first photo. My roommate and I don't talk anymore. I don't blame her. I wouldn't want to talk to me either. I stopped taking photos, not because I was scared, though I was at first, but because I didn't need them anymore. Didn't want any more windows into whatever existed on the other side of the lens. But I couldn't escape the photos entirely. They were still out there, circulating, being shared and analyzed and debated. Every few weeks, someone would send me a link to a new thread discussing them. Who is the woman in these photos? Creepiest images I've ever seen. Does anyone else feel like she's looking at them? That last one came up a lot. People saying that when they looked at her face, they felt watched. Like the photos weren't just images but windows, like she could see them through the screen. I tried not to think about what that meant. 6 months after that night at the rest stop, I got a message from a stranger. No subject line, no introduction, just a photo attachment. I almost didn't open it, almost deleted it without looking. But I had to know. The photo was a selfie. Some teenager I didn't recognize, making a duck face in her bathroom mirror. Normal, harmless, except for the shape standing behind her, barely visible in the shadows of the doorway. A figure with long dark hair and a face that didn't quite look right. My stomach dropped. The message below the photo said, "Is this the same thing from your pictures? I've been seeing it in all my photos for the past week. Please help me." I stared at the screen for a long time, thought about what to say, thought about the trap I'd escaped and the thing I'd released into the world. She wasn't gone. She was everywhere now, spreading from phone to phone, screen to screen, attaching herself to whoever looked at her image long enough, whoever acknowledged that she was real. I'd saved myself by making her everyone's problem. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. What could I tell this girl? Don't delete the photos, upload them everywhere, spread the curse to as many people as possible so it dilutes enough to let you escape. Was that even what had happened to me? Or was I just another carrier now, passing along something I didn't understand? I closed the message, didn't respond, told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that I'd done what I had to do to survive, that you can't save everyone. But I kept the message, couldn't bring myself to delete it, and sometimes, late at night, I wonder how many other messages are out there, How many people are waking up to photos they don't remember taking? How many are seeing a figure in their doorway, their mirror, their window, getting closer with every shot? I wonder if she's grateful to me for setting her free, or if she's angry, scattered across thousands of screens, unable to pull herself back together into something that can escape. I wonder if somewhere in the digital void, she's still looking for a way through. I don't take selfies anymore, don't pose for photos. When friends try to take pictures of me, I look away, step out of frame, find an excuse to be somewhere else. Because here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. I saw her completely. She touched me. She was inside my car, inches from my face, close enough that her breath was on my skin. What if part of her is still with me? What if I'm carrying something now, a seed or a splinter, waiting to grow? What if one day I'll be the thing standing in someone's doorway? I checked my reflection this morning. Just a quick glance in the bathroom mirror, the way you do without thinking. For just a second, a fraction of a second, my face didn't look quite right. The proportions were slightly off, the eyes a little too large. I blinked, and it was gone. Just me. Normal. Human. But I can't stop thinking about it. Can't stop wondering. If you're reading this, do me a favor. Take a selfie right now. Check the background. Check the reflections. Check the shadows in every corner of the frame. And if you see something that shouldn't be there, something with long dark hair and a face that's almost human, don't delete it. Whatever you do, don't delete it. You'll only make it harder to see when it finally gets close enough to touch. Story 3. The truck that followed me until I reached my street. The thing about that truck is that it never turned on its headlights. That's what I keep coming back to even now. It was 11 p.m. on a back road with no streetlights, and that truck followed me for 17 miles with nothing but darkness where its headlights should have been. I was 17. Just got my license 3 months earlier, still nervous behind the wheel, still figuring out how to merge and parallel park and all the things they don't really teach you in driver's ed. My parents had finally started letting me drive alone at night, which felt like freedom, like growing up, like proof that they trusted me. That night, I'd been at my friend Kayla's house. We'd been studying for a history test, lost track of time, and suddenly it was almost 11, and I had a 40-minute drive home. My mom had texted twice asking where I was. I told her I was leaving, grabbed my keys, and headed out. Kayla lived in the middle of nowhere. That's not an exaggeration. Her family had a farmhouse on 20 acres, surrounded by fields and forest, the nearest neighbor a half-mile away. To get back to town, you had to take County Road 7, this winding 2-lane road that cut through nothing but darkness and trees for miles before it connected to the highway. I'd driven it plenty of times during the day. At night, it was different. The kind of dark that swallows your headlights, that makes the trees look like walls closing in on either side. I remember gripping the steering wheel too tight, leaning forward like that would help me see better, the radio playing something I wasn't really listening to. I was maybe 5 minutes from Kayla's house when I first noticed the truck. It pulled out from a dirt road on my left. No signal, no warning, just this massive shape emerging from the darkness, falling in behind me. A pickup truck, dark-colored, the kind with the extended cab that seemed to loom in my rearview mirror. I didn't think much of it at first. It was a rural area. People drove trucks. Someone was probably just heading home the same direction I was. But then I noticed the headlights, or the lack of them. The truck was driving with its lights off, completely off. I could only see it because my taillights were reflecting off its grille, painting it in dim red every few seconds. Otherwise, it was just a shadow, a shape in the darkness following 20 feet behind me. My hands tightened on the wheel. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe their headlights were broken. Maybe they just forgot to turn them on. People do stupid things all the time. I sped up a little. Not a lot. I was already nervous about the curves on this road, didn't want to push my luck, but enough that someone following at a normal distance would fall behind. The truck sped up too, matched my pace exactly, stayed right there in my rearview mirror. that dark shape with no lights, close enough that I could make out the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat. My heart started beating faster. I reached for my phone, thought about calling my mom, then realized I had no signal. Of course I had no signal. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by hills and trees, and nothing that would bounce a cell signal back to me. I was alone. The road curved, and I took it carefully, watching the truck in my mirror. It took the curve the same way, same speed, same distance, like it was attached to me by an invisible rope. I tried to see the driver. Couldn't make out anything except a shape. Couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, young or old, threatening or harmless. Just a silhouette behind glass following me through the dark. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. Every curve, every straightaway, I kept checking the mirror. The truck never fell back, never turned off, never turned on its lights. It just followed, patient and silent, a predator stalking prey. I started talking to myself, something my mom always did when she was nervous, narrating what she was doing, what she was going to do, like putting words to it made it less scary. Okay, you're fine. You're almost to the highway. Once you're on the highway, there will be other cars, other people. You just have to make it to the highway. The highway was still 8 miles away, 8 miles of dark road and darker trees and that truck riding my bumper with its lights off. I thought about pulling over, letting them pass. But something told me that was a bad idea, that if I stopped, they would stop too. That whatever was happening, it would get worse if I gave them an opportunity. So I kept driving, kept my speed steady, kept my eyes moving between the road and the mirror and the darkness pressing in from all sides. The truck got closer, not all at once, gradually, inch by inch, until it was maybe 10 feet behind me, then 5. So close I could hear the rumble of its engine through my closed windows, a low growl that seemed to vibrate in my chest. I pressed the gas, took a curve too fast, felt the tires slip for a heart-stopping second before they caught. The truck stayed right behind me, matching my speed, matching my fear. And then, in the distance, I saw lights, the highway, other cars, other people, civilization emerging from the darkness like a promise. I pushed toward it. 80 miles an hour on a road meant for 50, not caring anymore about the curves, not caring about anything except getting out of that darkness and away from whatever was in that truck. I reached the highway, merged into traffic, nearly cut off a semi, didn't care. There were streetlights here, other vehicles, people who would see if something happened. I checked my mirror. The truck was gone, not behind me, not on the highway, not anywhere I could see. Like it had dissolved the moment I reached the light, melted back into the darkness it came from. I drove the rest of the way home with my hands shaking and my heart pounding and tears streaming down my face. Pulled into my driveway, ran inside, locked the door behind me. I was safe. I was home. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had almost happened, that I'd escaped something by seconds, by inches, by the thin margin of reaching the highway before the truck decided to make its move. I should have told my parents that night. Should have called the police, filed a report, done something. I didn't. Convinced myself I was overreacting, that it was just some guy who happened to be going the same direction, that the headlights thing was weird but not threatening. I was wrong, because 2 weeks later, the truck came back. I'd almost convinced myself it hadn't been real. 2 weeks of normal drives, to school, to work, to Kayla's house and back, without a single sign of that truck. No dark shapes in my mirror, no headlights that weren't there, just ordinary traffic, ordinary roads, ordinary life. Then it was a Friday night, and I was driving home from my shift at the grocery store where I worked part-time. Different route this time. Not the rural darkness of County Road 7, but the main road through town, streetlights every 50 feet, other cars around me. I stopped at a red light, checked my phone, looked up when the light turned green, and there it was, in my rearview mirror. The same truck, dark paint, extended cab, no front plates. sitting 3 cars back at the intersection, headlights off even though the sun had set an hour ago. I couldn't see the driver, too far away, too dark, but I knew. Some part of me just knew it was the same one. The light turned green. I drove, watched the mirror. The truck followed. Through town, past the grocery store, past the high school, past every turn I didn't take. When I signaled left, it signaled left. When I changed lanes, it changed lanes. Always keeping the same distance, always with those dead headlights, like empty eye sockets in the dark. I wasn't going home. I knew that immediately. Couldn't lead this thing to my house, couldn't let it know where I lived. Instead, I drove to the police station, pulled right into the parking lot, under the brightest lights I could find. The truck drove past, slow, deliberate. I caught a glimpse of it as it passed, and for the first time, I saw the driver. Just an impression. A man, I thought. Baseball cap pulled low. Face turned toward me as he passed, watching me through his window the way a wolf watches a rabbit. Then he was gone. Around the corner, into the night, swallowed by the darkness he seemed to carry with him. I sat in that parking lot for an hour, shaking, crying, trying to work up the courage to go inside and file a report. I didn't. What would I say? A truck followed me. I don't have a plate number. I can't describe the driver. He didn't do anything, just drove behind me and then drove away. They'd think I was paranoid, hysterical, some teenage girl who watched too many crime documentaries. So I went home, took the long way, checking my mirror every 3 seconds. The truck didn't reappear. I pulled into my driveway, ran inside, locked every door. That night, I told my parents. Not everything. I downplayed it, made it sound less scary than it was. Just said someone had been following me, that it happened twice, that I was a little freaked out. My dad frowned. Did you get the plate number? There wasn't one. On the front, I mean. I couldn't see the back. What kind of truck? Dark, big, a pickup with the extended cab. He exchanged a look with my mom, the kind of look parents give each other when they're trying to decide how seriously to take something. It's probably nothing, my mom said, but be careful, vary your routes, don't drive the same way every time. I nodded. Didn't tell them about County Road 7, didn't tell them about the headlights, or how close the truck had gotten, or the way the driver had looked at me as he passed the police station. For the next week, I was careful, changed my routes, left work at different times, stayed hyper-aware of every vehicle behind me, every truck that looked even slightly similar. Nothing, no sign of him. I started to relax. Then he found me at school. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I'd stayed late for a club meeting, walked out to the parking lot around 4:30. The lot was mostly empty, just a handful of cars scattered across the faded lines, the late autumn sun casting long shadows across the pavement. My car was parked near the back. I was halfway there when I saw it. The truck, parked in the row behind mine, facing my car like it had been waiting. I stopped dead, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just stood there in the middle of the parking lot, staring at that dark shape that had no business being at my school. The driver's door opened. I ran, back toward the building, back toward people, back toward anywhere that wasn't alone in a parking lot with a man climbing out of a truck that had been stalking me for weeks. I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, fast, and I ran harder, my backpack slamming against my spine, my lungs burning. I made it to the doors, yanked them open, threw myself inside. The hallway was empty, but I could hear voices from the gym, some sports practice still going on. I ran toward the sound, burst through the double doors, and suddenly I was surrounded by people. Students, coaches, the ordinary chaos of after-school athletics. I looked back at the doors I'd come through, empty, no one following. I found Coach Martinez, told him someone had chased me in the parking lot. He walked me back outside with 2 other teachers. The truck was gone. My car sat alone, untouched, exactly where I'd left it. "Are you sure someone was following you?" Coach Martinez asked, not unkindly. I wanted to scream, wanted to shake him and make him understand that I wasn't imagining things, that there was a man in a truck who kept finding me, who knew where I went to school now, who had gotten out and chased me. "I'm sure," I said instead. "I'm completely sure." They called my parents. My dad came to pick me up, drove my car home behind me. That night we filed a police report, gave them everything I could remember, the truck description, the baseball cap, the times and places. The officer took notes, promised to look into it, asked if I had any enemies, any ex-boyfriends who might be holding a grudge. I was 17. I'd had one boyfriend, freshman year, and we'd broken up because neither of us cared enough to keep dating. This wasn't about an ex. This was something else. Something that had chosen me for reasons I didn't understand. After the officer left, my dad installed extra locks on all our doors. My mom started driving me to school. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere alone anymore. For a while it helped. For a while I felt safe. But I couldn't stay locked inside forever, and whoever was in that truck, whatever he wanted, he wasn't going to stop just because I'd filed a report. He knew where I lived now. I was sure of that. And he was just getting started. The first time I saw the truck on my street, I was standing at my bedroom window. It was late, maybe 1 a.m., and I couldn't sleep. Hadn't been sleeping well since the parking lot incident, kept waking up to every sound, every creak of the house settling. I'd gotten up to get water and paused by my window on the way back, looking out at the quiet street below. That's when I saw it. Parked 3 houses down, under a broken streetlight. No interior lights, no movement. Just that dark shape sitting there in the shadows, like it belonged. I watched for 10 minutes. 15. The truck didn't move, didn't leave, just sat there, pointed toward my house, the driver invisible behind a tinted glass. I woke my dad. He called the police, and we watched from the window together as a patrol car rolled down our street. The officer shined a spotlight on the truck. Empty. No one inside. Just an abandoned vehicle with no plates, sitting under a broken streetlight in the middle of the night. The police ran the VIN. The truck had been reported stolen 3 months ago from a town 200 miles away. They towed it, filed a report, told us they'd investigate further. I should have felt relieved. The truck was gone, impounded. Whoever had been driving it would have to find another vehicle, start over, maybe give up entirely. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that taking his truck was just a minor inconvenience, that he'd already planned for this. 3 days later, I found the photographs. I was taking out the trash, something I'd been avoiding because it meant going outside alone, even just to the curb. It was broad daylight, my dad was home, nothing to worry about. I dragged the bin down the driveway and was about to head back inside when something caught my eye. An envelope tucked under the lid of our recycling bin, plain white. No address, no stamp. Just my name written on the front in neat block letters. Emma. My hands were shaking as I opened it. I don't know what I expected. A threat, maybe. A demand. Something that would explain what this person wanted, why they'd chosen me. What I found was worse. Photographs. Dozens of them, printed on glossy paper, stuffed into the envelope like a gift. Me walking to my car after work. Me sitting in the school cafeteria through a window. Me in my bedroom, visible through the gap in my curtains, changing clothes. Me at Kayla's house, months ago, before any of this started. Standing in her driveway, saying goodbye, completely unaware that someone was watching from the tree line with a camera. The photos went back almost a year of my life, documented by someone I'd never seen, someone who'd been watching me long before that first night on County Road 7. I dropped the envelope. The photos scattered across the driveway, all those images of me staring up from the concrete, and I screamed. My dad came running. My mom called 911. The police came, collected the photos, asked me questions I couldn't answer. Did I know anyone who might do this? Had I noticed anyone suspicious before the truck incidents? Had I received any strange messages, any contact attempts? No. I hadn't noticed anything because there hadn't been anything to notice. He'd been invisible, patient, watching me for a year without ever revealing himself. Until County Road 7. Until I'd driven alone on a dark road and he'd finally made his move. The detective who took over my case was a woman named Hernandez. She was kind but honest. Told me that without a plate number, without a clear image of the driver, without any digital trail, they had very little to go on. He's careful, she said. Experienced. This isn't his first time. The words hit me like a punch. Not his first time. Meaning there had been others. Other girls, other photos, other years of patient watching before he made his move. What happened to them? I asked. The others? Detective Hernandez didn't answer. She didn't have to. I could see it in her eyes. The cases that went cold, the girls who disappeared, the ones who were never found. My parents pulled me out of school, set up homeschooling, turned our house into a fortress. New locks, new cameras, motion sensors on every door and window. My dad started sleeping with a baseball bat beside his bed. My mom jumped at every car that drove past. We were prisoners in our own home, and somewhere out there he was still watching. I knew because I felt it, that prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the weight of eyes I couldn't see. Even with the curtains drawn, even with the cameras running, I could feel him out there, waiting. Then the gifts started arriving. Small things at first. A single rose left on our doorstep, no card. A bracelet I'd admired in a store window months ago, wrapped in tissue paper, sitting on the hood of my mom's car. A handwritten note slipped through our mail slot. I think about you every day. The police collected everything, dusted for prints, found nothing. Checked the neighborhood cameras, found nothing. Canvassed the area, talked to neighbors, came up empty every single time. He was a ghost, invisible, untraceable. The perfect predator, circling closer and closer while the people supposed to protect me fumbled in the dark. One night, about a month after the photos, I woke to a sound I couldn't identify. A soft tapping, rhythmic, coming from somewhere nearby. I lay frozen in bed, listening. Tap, 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 like fingernails against glass. My window. Someone was tapping on my bedroom window. Second floor. No balcony, no easy access. Someone had climbed up there, was pressed against the glass, was tapping to let me know they were there. I didn't scream, didn't move. Just lay there with my heart about to explode, staring at the ceiling, listening to that tap, tap, tap that seemed to say, I can reach you whenever I want. Nowhere is safe. You belong to me. The tapping stopped. I heard a scraping sound, something sliding down the side of the house. Then silence. When I finally found the courage to look, the window was empty. Just darkness and my own reflection staring back at me. But on the glass, traced in the fog of his breath, was a single word. Soon. I knew then that the police couldn't help me, that cameras and locks and baseball bats weren't going to stop someone this determined. If I wanted to survive, I was going to have to do something myself. I didn't tell my parents what I was planning. They would have stopped me, locked me in my room, called the police again to file another useless report. I couldn't blame them. They were doing everything they knew how to do. But everything they knew wasn't enough. The idea came to me in pieces. He wanted me alone, vulnerable. Every time he'd appeared, it was when I was isolated, on a dark road, in an empty parking lot, in my bedroom at night. He was waiting for the right moment, the perfect opportunity. So I would give him one. I told my parents I was going stir-crazy, that I needed to see Kayla, needed one normal afternoon with my best friend. My mom resisted, but my dad eventually agreed, as long as I texted every 30 minutes and came straight home before dark. I agreed to everything, hugged them both, drove to Kayla's house with my hands steady on the wheel for the first time in weeks. What they didn't know was that I'd already talked to Kayla. already told her everything, already made a plan. Her dad was a hunter, had been for 30 years. He owned guns, knew the land around their property, and when Kayla told him what was happening to me, really told him, not the watered-down version I'd given my parents, he didn't hesitate. "You're not going to be alone," he said when I arrived. "Not for a second. But he doesn't need to know that." The plan was simple. I would drive home alone, taking County Road 7, the same route where this had started. Kayla's dad would follow at a distance in his own truck, lights off, invisible in the darkness. If the stalker appeared, if he tried anything, Mr. Dawson would be right there. It felt insane, reckless, the kind of plan that gets people killed in movies. But it also felt like the only option I had left. I left Kayla's house at 9 p.m., late enough to be dark, early enough that my parents wouldn't panic. I pulled onto County Road 7 and started the long drive home, watching my mirrors, waiting for the familiar shape to appear. For the first 10 minutes, nothing. Just darkness and trees and the distant glow of Mr. Dawson's truck, half a mile back, barely visible. Then I saw it, not behind me, ahead, parked on the shoulder, just around a curve, waiting where I wouldn't see it until I was almost on top of it. A different truck this time, newer, darker, no plates. But I knew, the same way prey knows when a predator is near, some ancient instinct screaming in my blood. I slowed down. My hands were shaking, but I kept driving, kept moving toward the truck that had been waiting for me, that had known I would take this road tonight. As I approached, the truck's engine started. Its headlights stayed off. It pulled onto the road behind me. I pressed the gas, watched the speedometer climb, 50, 60, 70. The truck matched my speed, closing the distance, that dark shape growing larger in my mirror. Where was Mr. Dawson? I couldn't see his truck anymore. The curves of the road had swallowed him, and I was alone with my stalker for the first time since this nightmare began. The truck got closer, closer. I could see the grille now, chrome glinting in my taillights. Could see the shadow behind the windshield, that baseball cap, that face I'd never clearly seen. He was so close now, 10 feet, 5, almost touching my bumper, and then he hit me, not hard, just a tap, a jolt that sent my car lurching forward, testing me, seeing how I'd react. I screamed, couldn't help it. The sound tore out of my throat as I fought to keep control, as the truck fell back and then surged forward again, hitting me harder this time. My car fishtailed. Tires screeched. I saw trees rushing toward me, yanked the wheel, overcorrected, felt the world spin. I ended up on the shoulder, facing the wrong direction. My engine stalled, my headlights illuminating nothing but empty road. The truck had stopped 50 feet away, engine idling, waiting. I fumbled for my phone. No signal. Of course, no signal. The driver's door opened. He stepped out, walked toward me. Slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. I could see him clearly now, tall, maybe 40, that baseball cap pulled low, a face that was terrifyingly ordinary, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it. He was smiling. I tried to start my car. The engine turned over, coughed, died. Again, nothing. He was 20 feet away, 15, 10, and then headlights exploded behind him. Mr. Dawson's truck came around the curve at full speed, high beams blazing, engine roaring. The stalker spun around, eyes wide, that smile finally gone. Mr. Dawson didn't slow down. The truck clipped the stalker as he dove out of the way, sent him sprawling across the pavement. Mr. Dawson slammed on the brakes, was out of his truck before it stopped moving, shotgun in his hands. "Don't move." His voice was steady, calm, the voice of a man who'd been hunting for 30 years and finally had his target in his sights. "Put your hands where I can see them." The stalker was on the ground, leg bent at a wrong angle, face twisted in pain. He looked up at Mr. Dawson, at the shotgun, at me sitting frozen in my car. "You don't understand," he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "She's special. I've been watching her for so long. I just wanted... Shut up. Mr. Dawson kept the gun trained on him, while Kayla, who I hadn't even realized was in the truck, called 911. I sat in my car and watched, shaking so hard my teeth were chattering, as the man who'd been hunting me for a year lay bleeding on the asphalt. The police came. Ambulance. More police. They put him in handcuffs, loaded him onto a stretcher, read him his rights while he kept trying to look at me, kept trying to catch my eye. I didn't look back. Couldn't. Detective Hernandez arrived an hour later. She found me wrapped in a blanket in the back of Mr. Dawson's truck, Kayla holding my hand, her dad giving his statement to a patrol officer. "You should have told us what you were planning," she said. "Would you have let me do it?" She didn't answer, just looked at me with something like respect, or maybe recognition, the understanding that sometimes when the system fails you, you have to save yourself. "We got him," she said finally. "That's what matters." They got him. After a year of watching, weeks of stalking, gifts and photographs and a word traced on my window, they finally got him. But I knew the truth. I got him. Me and Kayla and her father taking a risk the police never would have sanctioned, and I would carry that night with me forever. His name was Dale Whitmore, 43 years old. Long-haul trucker based out of a town I'd never heard of, 4 states away. The police found things in his apartment, boxes of them, photographs, journals, souvenirs, locks of hair, pieces of jewelry, a collection of driver's licenses that made Detective Hernandez go pale when she saw them. 7 licenses. 7 different girls from 7 different states, spanning almost 15 years. None of them had ever been found. I was going to be number 8. He'd written about me in his journals, pages and pages describing how he'd first seen me at a gas station almost 2 years ago, how he'd followed me home, how he'd spent months learning my schedule, my habits, my routes. He wrote about the way I laughed, the clothes I wore, the songs I sang along to in my car. He wrote about what he was going to do when he finally took me. I didn't read those parts. Detective Hernandez told me not to, and for once, I listened. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified on the 4th day, sat in that witness box, and looked at him across the courtroom while lawyers asked me questions I'd already answered 100 times. He watched me the whole time, that same steady stare, that same unsettling focus, like even now, even in handcuffs, even facing life in prison, he still believed I belonged to him. I didn't look away, not once. I'd spent months being afraid of him, and I was done. Let him stare. Let him see that I was still here, still standing, still alive, despite everything he'd done. The jury convicted him on 18 counts: stalking, assault, attempted kidnapping. They couldn't charge him with the other girls. Not enough evidence, the prosecutor said, though everyone knew he'd killed them. Everyone knew those 7 licenses represented 7 lives he'd ended. 7 families still waiting for answers they would never get. He got 4 consecutive life sentences, no possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, he didn't react, just sat there with that blank expression, that ordinary face, like none of it mattered, like he was already planning his next hunt, even though there would never be a next hunt. I cried, not in the courtroom. I held it together there, kept my face neutral, refused to give him the satisfaction. But afterward, in the hallway with my parents and Kayla and Mr. Dawson, I broke down completely, sobbed until I couldn't breathe, until my whole body was shaking, until all the fear and rage and grief I'd been holding in finally came pouring out. It was over. It was finally over. Except it wasn't. Not really. The trial ended. Life was supposed to go back to normal. I went back to school, finished my senior year, got accepted to a college 300 miles away. Everyone said I was brave, said I was strong, said I was an inspiration for fighting back, for refusing to be a victim. I didn't feel brave. I felt broken in ways that didn't show on the surface. I couldn't drive at night anymore. Even now, 6 years later, I won't get behind the wheel after sunset. The darkness feels different, dangerous in a way I can't explain to people who haven't lived it. Every set of headlights in my rearview mirror makes my heart rate spike. Every truck that pulls up behind me sends me back to that road, that night, that tap, tap, tap against my window. I sleep with the light on, check my locks 3 times before bed, vary my routes obsessively, never taking the same path twice, always watching for the shape that might be following. Therapy helps. I've been going for years, working through the trauma, learning to live with what happened instead of being consumed by it. My therapist says I have PTSD, says the hypervigilance is normal, says healing isn't linear, and there will be good days and bad days. She's right. There are good days. More of them now than there used to be. But there are also nights when I wake up in a cold sweat, certain I heard tapping at my window. Nights when I see a dark truck in a parking lot and have to sit in my car for 20 minutes until I can convince myself it's not him. Nights when I dream about County Road 7, about headlights that aren't there, about a smile on an ordinary face. He's still in prison. Will be forever. I know that. I check sometimes, look up his name, confirm he's still locked away, remind myself that he can't hurt me anymore. But the fear doesn't care about facts. The fear lives in my body now, written into my nervous system, a permanent reminder of what almost happened. Sometimes I think about the other girls, the 7 who weren't as lucky as me. I wonder what their names were, what they dreamed about, who they might have become if Dale Whitmore hadn't chosen them. I wonder if their families will ever get closure, if the bodies will ever be found, if there's any peace to be had when someone you love simply vanishes. I'm alive because of Kayla, because of her father, who didn't hesitate to help when the system had failed, because I took a risk that could have gotten me killed, but instead set me free. Not everyone has a Kayla. Not everyone has a Mr. Dawson. I think about that a lot, about all the girls out there being followed, being watched, being hunted by men whose faces they've never seen. Girls who file police reports that go nowhere. Girls whose instincts are dismissed as paranoia, whose fear is written off as hysteria. If you're one of them, if you're reading this and you know, in your gut, that something is wrong, trust yourself. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. That feeling exists for a reason. It's your body trying to keep you alive. Don't wait for someone else to save you. The police can't always help. The system isn't built to protect you from someone patient enough, careful enough, determined enough. Sometimes you have to save yourself. Find your Kayla, make your plan, do whatever it takes to survive. I still drive past that stretch of County Road 7 sometimes. Not at night, never at night, but during the day, when the sun is high and the trees don't look like walls closing in. I slow down when I pass the spot where my car spun out, where I saw his face for the first time, where headlights exploded out of the darkness and everything changed. It looks different in daylight, smaller, just a curve in a road, a patch of shoulder, nothing special. But I know what happened there, what almost happened. And every time I drive past, I remind myself, I survived. That's enough. That has to be enough. If you see a truck following you with its headlights off, don't ignore it. Don't convince yourself you're imagining things. Don't wait to see what happens. Drive to the nearest police station. Call someone. Do not go home. Because the person in that truck has been watching you longer than you know, and they're just waiting for the right moment to make their move. Story 4. The manager who kept asking about a person I never met. The first time Mr. Leland asked about her, I thought he'd confused me with someone else. "How's Marissa doing?" he said, leaning against the doorframe of my cubicle, casual, friendly, like he was asking about the weather. I looked up from my computer, still trying to remember the names of my coworkers after 3 days on the job. "Sorry, who?" "Marissa." He smiled, this patient, almost fatherly smile. "You two are close, aren't you?" I don't know anyone named Marissa." Something flickered in his expression, gone so fast I almost missed it. Then the smile was back, warm and unconcerned. "My mistake. You look like someone who would know her." He tapped the doorframe twice, a little rhythm, and walked away. I sat there for a moment, confused, then shrugged it off. New job, new faces, easy to get wires crossed. Mr. Leland was the regional manager, oversaw 3 branch offices, only visited ours once or twice a week. He probably mixed up employees all the time. I went back to my spreadsheets and forgot about it. The job was nothing special. Data entry for a mid-sized insurance company. The kind of beige-carpeted, fluorescent-lit office that exists in every city in America. I was 26, recently relocated, grateful for any paycheck that let me make rent. The work was boring, the people were fine, and I figured I'd stick it out for a year or 2 before finding something better. My desk was in a corner of the 3rd floor, surrounded by identical cubicles filled with identical people doing identical tasks. The woman next to me was named Deborah. She'd been there 11 years and had a calendar of cats in sweaters pinned above her monitor. The guy across from me was named Terrence. He listened to podcasts through one earbud and never made eye contact. Normal, mundane. Exactly what I needed after the chaos of my last few years. The second time Mr. Leland asked about Marissa, I'd been there 2 weeks. He found me in the break room, pouring coffee into a mug I'd brought from home. Same casual lean against the counter. Same friendly smile. "Have you heard from Marissa lately?" I set down the coffee pot. "Mr. Leland, I really don't know who that is. I think you have me confused with someone else." "Do I?" He tilted his head, studying me. "You sit at her desk, you know. Same cubicle. I thought maybe she'd reached out." Her desk. The corner cubicle I'd been assigned on my first day. Nobody had mentioned anything about a previous occupant. "I haven't heard from anyone named Marissa," I said carefully. Did she work here before me?" "She did." Mr. Leland picked up the sugar dispenser, turned it over in his hands like he was examining it for flaws. "Left about 3 months before you started. Very sudden, very unexpected." He looked up at me. "You're sure she hasn't contacted you?" "I've never met her. I don't even know what she looks like." He nodded slowly, set down the sugar. That smile again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "If she does reach out," he said, "I'd appreciate it if you let me know." He left before I could respond. I asked Deborah about it that afternoon, kept my voice casual, like I was just making conversation. "Hey, do you know anything about the person who had my desk before me? Someone named Marissa?" Deborah's fingers froze over her keyboard, just for a second. Then she resumed typing, eyes fixed on her screen. "She doesn't work here anymore." "Yeah, I gathered that. Mr. Leland keeps asking me about her. It's kind of weird." "Mr. Leland asks everyone about her." Deborah's voice was flat, careful. "Best not to engage. Just tell him you don't know anything." "But I don't know anything. I've never even..." "Then you have nothing to worry about." She turned to look at me, and something in her expression made me stop talking. Not fear, exactly. Something more controlled. A warning wrapped in blankness. "Just do your job, keep your head down, and don't ask questions about Marissa. Trust me." She turned back to her computer. Conversation over. I tried asking Terrence. He pulled out his earbud, listened to my question, and shook his head. "Never heard of her. She sat at my desk 3 months ago." "I've only been here 2 months." He put the earbud back in. "Sorry, man." But I saw the way his eyes darted toward Deborah's cubicle, the way his jaw tightened. He was lying. I was sure of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Mr. Leland's questions, Deborah's warning, the cubicle I sat in 8 hours a day that had apparently belonged to someone who vanished without explanation. I pulled out my laptop, searched Marissa and the company name. Found nothing. Searched Marissa and the city. Too many results, none of them useful. I didn't have a last name, didn't have a photo, didn't have anything except a first name and a bad feeling. The next morning, I got to work early. The office was almost empty, just a few early birds scattered across the floor, none of them paying attention to me. I sat down at my desk and started opening drawers. office supplies, rubber bands, a stapler that didn't work. Nothing personal, nothing left behind by whoever had been here before. Except, in the back of the bottom drawer, wedged behind a stack of old folders, I found a photograph. A woman, maybe my age, standing in front of a birthday cake. She was smiling, really smiling, the kind that crinkles your eyes. And behind her, I could see the break room. The same counter, the same cabinets, the same coffee pot I'd used yesterday. On the back, in neat handwriting, Marissa's 25th birthday, March 14th. She was real. She had worked here. She had celebrated her birthday in that break room, surrounded by co-workers who now pretended they'd never heard her name. And then she'd disappeared. I slipped the photograph into my pocket, closed the drawer. When I looked up, Mr. Leland was standing at the entrance to my cubicle. "Found something interesting?" he asked. His smile was gone. I slid my hand away from the drawer, trying to look casual, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. The photograph was in my pocket now, pressed against my thigh, and I could feel its edges digging into my skin like an accusation. "Just looking for a stapler," I said. "The one they gave me doesn't work." Mr. Leland didn't move from the doorway. He stood there watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Not angry exactly, but intent, focused, like he was waiting for me to make a mistake. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, filling the silence between us. "Staplers are in the supply closet," he said finally. "Third door on the left, past the break room. You shouldn't need to dig through old drawers." "Right. Thanks." I turned back to my computer, hoping he would leave, hoping he hadn't seen what I'd found. He didn't leave. I could feel him standing there, watching the back of my head, and the weight of his attention made my skin crawl. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, while I stared at my screen without seeing it, cursor blinking on a spreadsheet I couldn't focus on. "Marissa used to come in early too," he said quietly. "Before anyone else. She liked the quiet," she said. "Liked having the office to herself." I didn't respond. Didn't know what he wanted me to say. She was a good employee, dedicated, never missed a day in 3 years. His voice was soft, almost wistful. And then one morning, she just didn't show up. No call, no email, no explanation. Her apartment was empty. Her phone was disconnected. It was like she'd never existed at all. I forced myself to turn around to meet his eyes. "That sounds concerning. Did anyone file a missing persons report?" Something shifted in his expression. That flicker again, there and gone, too fast to identify. "The police looked into it, said there was no evidence of foul play. Adults are allowed to disappear if they want to." He smiled, but it was wrong somehow. Too wide, too practiced. "But I don't think Marissa wanted to disappear. I think something happened to her, and I think someone in this office knows what." The implication hung in the air between us. He wasn't just asking about Marissa anymore. He was accusing, testing, watching to see how I'd react. "I started 3 months after she left," I said carefully. "I never met her. I don't know anything about what happened." "Of course you don't." Mr. Leland stepped back from the doorway, adjusting his tie with precise, deliberate movements. "But if you hear anything, find anything, I hope you'll let me know. I just want to understand what happened to her. That's all any of us want." He walked away, footsteps fading into the hum of the office coming to life around us. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway, trying to convince myself that the conversation had been normal, that his interest was just concern for a former employee, that there was nothing sinister about the way he'd watched me, waited for me, questioned me. I couldn't convince myself. Something was very wrong here, and I was sitting right in the middle of it. During lunch, I went to HR, made up a story about needing to update some paperwork, then casually asked about the employee who'd had my desk before me. The woman behind the counter, a tired-looking blonde named Patricia, typed something into her computer and frowned at the screen. "I don't see any record of that cubicle being previously assigned," she said. According to our system, you're the first person to occupy that workspace. That can't be right. I found some old files in the desk, and my manager mentioned someone named Marissa. There's no Marissa in our employee database, current or former. Patricia's voice had gone flat, professional, the same careful blankness I'd seen in Deborah's face. I don't know what files you found, but they must have been misfiled from another department. She was lying. They were all lying. An entire office full of people pretending that a woman who'd worked there for 3 years had never existed. I went back to my desk and pulled up the company directory, searching for Marissa. Nothing. I searched for employees who'd left in the past year. The list was short and none of the names matched. I checked the company newsletter archives, looking for any mention of birthdays, promotions, team events. March 14th, the date on the back of the photograph. Nothing. No birthday announcement, no celebration, no evidence that anyone had ever cut a cake in that break room. But I had the photograph, physical proof that she'd been real, that she'd stood in that room and smiled at a camera while her coworkers gathered around her. Someone had taken that picture. Someone had written that caption on the back. Someone in this office knew exactly what had happened to Marissa, and they were going to extraordinary lengths to make sure no one ever found out. That night, I searched online for missing persons reports in the area, found dozens of names, dozens of faces, but none of them matched the woman in the photograph. I tried social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, searching every combination of Marissa and the company name and the city that I could think of. Nothing. No profiles, no tagged photos, no digital footprint of any kind. It was like she'd been erased, not just from the office, but from everywhere, scrubbed from databases and directories and the entire internet, leaving nothing behind but a single photograph hidden in the back of a drawer. I couldn't stop looking at that picture. Her smile, her eyes, the cake with 25 candles glowing in front of her. She looked happy, normal. The kind of person who shows up to work every day, celebrates birthdays with coworkers, lives a quiet and unremarkable life. And then one day, she'd vanished, and everyone who'd known her had agreed to pretend she'd never existed at all. The next morning, I found a note on my desk. No signature, no return address, just a single sheet of paper, folded twice, sitting on my keyboard like it had always been there. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was neat, careful, familiar, the same handwriting from the back of the photograph. Stop asking questions. He's always listening. If you want to survive this place, forget you ever heard her name. I looked up, scanning the office. Deborah was typing at her desk, eyes fixed on her screen. Terrence had his earbud in, nodding along to something I couldn't hear. Everyone going about their morning like nothing was wrong. But someone had left this note. Someone who knew about Marissa, knew about my questions, knew that I was getting too close to something I didn't understand. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket next to the photograph. 2 pieces of evidence now, 2 threads leading somewhere I wasn't sure I wanted to go. But I couldn't stop, not now. Not when I was the only person willing to admit that Marissa had ever been real. The note said he was always listening. I started paying attention to what that meant. Mr. Leland wasn't in our office every day. He split his time between 3 branches, showing up at ours maybe twice a week. But even when he wasn't physically present, his influence was everywhere. The security cameras in every hallway, angled to catch every conversation. The company phones that recorded calls for quality assurance. The IT policy that gave management access to every email, every search, every keystroke on company computers. He didn't need to be in the building to know what I was doing. He just needed to check the logs. I started being more careful, did my research at home, on my personal laptop, using coffee shop Wi-Fi instead of my own network. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia felt appropriate when an entire office had conspired to erase someone from existence. It took me 3 days to find her last name. I'd been searching wrong, looking for Marissa as a first name, when I should have been looking for disappearances, missing persons, unsolved cases. I found a small article in a local news archive dated 4 months ago. Family seeks answers in disappearance of local woman. The woman's name was Marissa Okonkwo, 25 years old, last seen leaving her workplace on a Friday evening in March. The article included a photograph. The same woman from the birthday picture, same smile, same eyes, same face that had been scrubbed from every company record. Her family was still looking for her, still putting up flyers, still calling the police, still hoping someone would come forward with information. And meanwhile, 15 miles away, an entire office full of people pretended they'd never heard her name. I dug deeper, found Marissa's Facebook page, still active, frozen in time on the day she disappeared. Her last post was a photo of her morning coffee with the caption, "Friday vibes ready for the weekend." The comments underneath were heartbreaking. Friends asking where she was, family begging her to call, strangers sharing the missing persons poster. 347 comments, and not a single one from anyone at our company. Her co-workers hadn't just erased her from the office. They'd erased themselves from her life entirely, unfriended her, blocked her, removed any connection that might link them to a missing woman. Why would they do that? Why would an entire office agree to pretend a colleague had never existed unless they were hiding something? Unless they knew something about her disappearance that they didn't want anyone to find out? I thought about Mr. Leland. The way he kept asking about her, the way he watched me, tested me, seemed to be waiting for something. Was he looking for answers, like he claimed? Or was he making sure no one got too close to the truth? The next day, I did something stupid. I waited until Mr. Leland was in a meeting, then slipped into the records room on the second floor. It was supposed to be restricted, employee files, contracts, things that regular data entry clerks weren't supposed to access. But the lock was old, and I'd watched Deborah punch in the code enough times to memorize it. Inside, the room was dim and dusty, filled with filing cabinets that stretched from floor to ceiling. I found the employee records section and started searching. Okonkwo. Nothing under O. I tried M for Marissa. Nothing. Tried every letter, every drawer, every folder I could find. Marissa's file wasn't just missing from the digital system. It had been physically removed, leaving no trace that she'd ever worked here. But I found something else. A drawer labeled Terminated Confidential, tucked in the back corner of the room. Inside were files for employees who'd left the company under unusual circumstances. Disciplinary actions, resignations under pressure, people who'd been quietly let go. And at the very back, a folder with no name on the tab. Just a date, March 17th, 3 days after Marissa's birthday, the day she'd disappeared. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single document, a termination form, unsigned, with Marissa's employee ID number at the top. The reason for termination was listed as voluntary resignation, but someone had crossed that out in red ink and written something else. Handled RL. RL, Robert Leland. I took a photo of the document with my phone, then put everything back exactly where I'd found it. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely close the drawer. Handled. What did that mean? What had he done to her? I was so focused on getting out of there that I almost didn't notice the other files in that drawer. Almost didn't see the pattern. There were 6 folders total, each with a date instead of a name. The oldest was from 2019. The most recent was Marissa's from this year. 6 employees over 5 years, all handled by RL, all terminated under circumstances confidential enough to warrant their own secret drawer. 6 people, 6 disappearances, and 1 manager who kept asking questions like he was looking for answers, when really he was making sure no one else found them first. I left the records room and went straight to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall, trying to breathe through the panic clawing at my chest. 6 people. Were they all missing? Were they all dead? Was I sitting in the desk of a murdered woman, working for the man who'd killed her? I had to go to the police. Had to show them the photograph, the document, the pattern of disappearances hiding in that back drawer. But even as I thought it, I remembered Deborah's warning, Terrence's lies, Patricia's blank denial. This whole office was complicit, whether out of fear or loyalty, I didn't know. But they'd all chosen to protect Mr. Leland rather than the people he'd handled. What would happen if I went to the police and they dismissed me the way they'd apparently dismissed Marissa's family? What would happen if Mr. Leland found out I'd been in the records room, found out I knew about the other files, found out I was a threat? I looked down at my phone. The photo of the termination document stared back at me. Handled. RL. I had evidence now. Real evidence. But I also had a target on my back, and I was running out of time to figure out what to do about it. When I came out of the bathroom, Deborah was standing in the hallway. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, then glanced toward the records room door at the end of the corridor. "You shouldn't have gone in there," she said quietly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I've been here 11 years. I've seen 6 people sit at that desk before you. You want to know what they all had in common?" I waited, heart pounding. "They all asked questions," she said, "and then they stopped coming to work." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me alone in the hallway with the weight of what she'd said settling over me like a shroud. 6 people at my desk, 6 files in that drawer, 6 employees who'd asked questions and then vanished. And now I was number 7. I should have left that day, packed up my things, walked out the door, never looked back. But I kept thinking about the 6 people before me, the ones who'd asked questions and disappeared. If I ran now, what would stop me from ending up like them? Mr. Leland knew where I lived. He had access to every piece of information the company had collected about me. Running wouldn't make me safe. It would just make me easier to handle. So I stayed, went back to my desk, pretended to work, and started planning. The first thing I did was make copies of everything. The photograph, the note, the picture I'd taken of the termination document. I uploaded them to 3 different cloud accounts, emailed them to myself at addresses Mr. Leland didn't know about, and mailed physical copies to a P.O. box I'd rented under a different name. If something happened to me, the evidence would survive. The second thing I did was reach out to Marissa's family, found her mother's contact information through the missing persons page, and sent her an anonymous email. Told her that I worked at the company her daughter had disappeared from, that I had evidence of wrongdoing, that she should contact the police and mention the name Robert Leland. I didn't sign it, didn't give any details that could trace back to me. But I wanted someone outside that office to know what was happening, someone who had a reason to keep pushing even if I couldn't. The third thing I did was set a trap. I'd noticed something about Mr. Leland's schedule. He always visited our office on Tuesdays and Fridays, always arrived around 10 in the morning, always spent the first hour in his corner office with the door closed. Whatever he did during that hour, calls, paperwork, plotting the disappearance of inconvenient employees, he did it alone and uninterrupted. That Friday, I got to work at 6 a.m. The building was nearly empty, just the security guard in the lobby and a few cleaners finishing their rounds. I went straight to Mr. Leland's office and found it locked, but the lock was the same model as the records room, same code, same lack of imagination from whoever had designed this building's security. Inside, the office was immaculate. Neat desk, organized shelves, not a single personal item anywhere. It looked like a showroom, not a workspace, the kind of place designed to intimidate rather than function. I started searching, carefully, methodically, looking for anything that might explain what had happened to Marissa and the others. I found it in the bottom drawer of his desk, hidden beneath a stack of quarterly reports. A leather journal, old and worn, filled with handwritten entries dating back almost a decade. The handwriting was precise, almost mechanical, the words arranged in columns like a ledger. Names, dates, outcomes. Jennifer Walsh, 2016, asked about discrepancies in client files, handled March 22nd. Marcus Chen, 2017. Noticed irregularities in expense reports. Handled July 14th. Danielle Foster, 2019. Threatened to contact authorities. Handled 11/3. The list went on. 12 names in total, spanning 9 years. 12 employees who'd noticed something wrong, asked the wrong questions, threatened the wrong people. 12 people who'd been handled by Robert Leland and never seen again. At the bottom of the most recent page, I found Marissa's entry. Marissa Okonkwo, 2024. Discovered financial irregularities, attempted to copy evidence, handled March 17th. And below that, in fresher ink, a new entry. Nathan Cross, 2024. Asking questions about MO, currently monitoring, outcome pending, my name, my entry, outcome pending. I took photos of every page, hands shaking so badly the images came out blurred. Took them again, forcing myself to hold steady, to breathe, to document everything before I was caught. The journal was proof, not just of Marissa's fate, but of a pattern stretching back years. Serial murder dressed up as corporate efficiency, hidden behind the bland facade of an insurance company. I was putting the journal back when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. I closed the drawer, moved toward the door, tried to look like I had a reason to be there. But when I stepped into the hallway, Mr. Leland was already waiting for me. He stood at the end of the corridor, hands folded in front of him, watching me with that same patient expression he always wore, like he'd known exactly where I'd be and what I'd find. "Nathan," he said. My name sounded wrong in his mouth, like a specimen label. "You're here early." "I was looking for you, actually." The lie came out smoother than I expected. "Had some questions about the Henderson file. Patricia said you might have the older records." "Patricia doesn't work Fridays." He smiled, that terrible practiced smile that never reached his eyes. "Did you find what you were looking for?" He knew. He'd known from the moment I'd started asking about Marissa, maybe from the moment I'd been assigned to her desk. He'd been watching me the way a cat watches a mouse, waiting to see what I would do, whether I'd be smart enough to look away or stupid enough to keep digging. I'd been stupid. And now I was standing alone in an empty hallway with a man who'd killed 12 people. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said. "I'm just trying to do my job. Whatever happened before I got here, whatever happened to the people at my desk, it's none of my business. I just want to work and go home." Mr. Leland tilted his head, studying me like an interesting problem. "That's what Marissa said at the end, that she just wanted to forget what she'd seen, move on, pretend she didn't know. But she'd already made copies, already told people. Once you know something, Nathan, you can't unknow it. And I can't unknow that you know." He took a step toward me. I took a step back. "It doesn't have to be unpleasant," he continued, his voice soft and reasonable. "The others fought, and it made things difficult, messy. But if you cooperate, if you come with me quietly, I can make it quick, painless. You'll just disappear like all the others. Your family will wonder, but eventually they'll move on. Everyone moves on." He was close now, close enough that I could see the emptiness in his eyes, the complete absence of anything human behind that professional mask. This man had killed 12 people and felt nothing, would kill me and feel nothing, would keep killing until someone stopped him. I wasn't going to be number 13. I ran, not toward the elevator. He'd catch me there, trap me in a metal box with nowhere to go. I sprinted for the stairwell at the far end of the hall, slammed through the door, and took the stairs 3 at a time. Behind me, I heard Mr. Leland's footsteps, calm and measured, not running, but not stopping either. He knew the building better than I did, knew there was no way out that he couldn't cover. But I wasn't trying to get out. I was trying to get seen. I burst through the door onto the main floor just as the first wave of employees was arriving. 8 o'clock, the early crowd, people with coffee cups and laptop bags filing in through the lobby. I ran straight into the middle of them, gasping, making a scene. putting as many witnesses between me and the stairwell door as possible. Mr. Leland emerged a few seconds later. He stopped at the edge of the lobby, watching me across the crowd of confused co-workers. His expression hadn't changed. Still calm, still patient, still that empty professional mask. But he didn't come any closer. Couldn't, not with 30 people watching. "Nathan." His voice carried across the lobby, warm and concerned, the voice of a worried manager dealing with a troubled employee. "Let's go back to my office and talk about this. Whatever's wrong, we can work it out." "Stay away from me." I was backing toward the front door, phone already in my hand. "I know what you did. I have proof. The journal in your desk, 12 people, 12 names, all of them handled by you." The lobby had gone silent. Everyone was staring now, looking between me and Mr. Leland, trying to understand what was happening. I saw Deborah near the elevators, her face pale, her hand pressed against her mouth like she was trying to hold something in. "He's killed people," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Employees who asked questions, who noticed things they weren't supposed to notice. He made them disappear, and you all helped cover it up. Marissa Okonkwo. She worked here. She sat at my desk, and he killed her because she found out about the financial irregularities he was hiding." Mr. Leland's mask flickered. Just for a second, a flash of something cold and furious beneath the surface. Then it was gone, replaced by a look of sad concern that made my skin crawl. "Nathan has been under a lot of stress lately," he said to the crowd. "I'm afraid he's had some kind of breakdown. Someone should call security, and maybe an ambulance. He needs help." But nobody moved. They were all looking at me now, at my phone held up like a shield, at the fear on my face that was too real to fake. And I saw doubt creeping into their expressions, the first cracks in the wall of complicity Mr. Leland had built around himself. "I'm sending the evidence to the police right now," I said. "Photos of the journal, names, dates, everything. You can try to stop me, but it's already uploaded. It's already out there. You can't make this disappear the way you made them disappear." I hit send, watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, watched the confirmation pop up, email delivered, files attached, evidence transmitted to the detective whose card I'd found on Marissa's missing persons page. It was done. Whatever happened next, the truth was out. Mr. Leland's expression went blank. Not angry, not afraid, just empty. The face of a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse, calculating his options, realizing he had none. He ran, didn't make it far. The security guard at the front desk had been listening too, had already called for backup, and 2 more guards were coming through the door just as Mr. Leland tried to push past them. They tackled him to the ground, pinned him there while he struggled and shouted things that didn't make sense, about the company, about what he'd done for them, about how none of this would have happened if people had just minded their own business. The police arrived 20 minutes later, then more police, then detectives, federal agents, people in suits who didn't identify themselves but carried the weight of serious authority. They took my statement, took my phone, took me to a room where I spent 6 hours answering questions about everything I'd seen and heard and found. The journal was recovered from Mr. Leland's office. So were other things, files he'd kept, records of payments he'd received, evidence of a financial scheme that had been running for over a decade. The company had been laundering money for clients who couldn't afford scrutiny, and Robert Leland had been the fixer, the man who made problems disappear, whether those problems were suspicious transactions or suspicious employees. They found Marissa 3 weeks later, a shallow grave in the woods behind a property owned by one of the company's shell corporations. She wasn't alone. There were others, some of them matching names from the journal, some of them from before Mr. Leland started keeping records. 11 bodies in total, 11 people who'd asked the wrong questions and paid for it with their lives. The 12th name from the journal, a woman named Patricia Huang, was found alive. She'd been the one who left me the note, the one who'd written on the back of Marissa's photograph. She'd been too afraid to come forward herself, but she'd been trying to warn people for years, leaving breadcrumbs for anyone brave or stupid enough to follow them. When the police finally told her it was safe, she broke down crying and didn't stop for an hour. Mr. Leland was charged with 12 counts of murder, plus fraud, money laundering, and enough other crimes to ensure he'd never see the outside of a prison. The trial lasted 4 months. I testified on the 7th day, sat in that witness box and told the story of a photograph hidden in a drawer and a manager who kept asking about a woman I'd never met. He watched me the whole time. That same patient stare, that same empty expression, like he was still waiting for me to make a mistake. But he couldn't touch me anymore. Couldn't touch anyone. The company was shut down. Most of my co-workers were cleared of wrongdoing. They'd been afraid, complicit in their silence, but not in the crimes themselves. Deborah testified too eventually, said she'd known something was wrong for years but had been too scared to speak up, too convinced that no one would believe her. I understood. Fear makes cowards of all of us. The only difference is what we do when the fear finally breaks. I don't work in an office anymore. Can't stand the fluorescent lights, the cubicle walls, the feeling of being watched and measured and filed away. I do freelance work now, from home, on my own schedule. It's lonely sometimes, but it's safe. And after everything I went through, safe is enough. Sometimes I think about Marissa, the woman who smiled in that birthday photograph, who came to work every day not knowing she'd stumbled onto something that would get her killed. She deserved better. They all did. All 12 of them, erased from existence because they noticed something they weren't supposed to notice. I keep her photograph on my desk, a reminder of what happens when good people stay silent and what can happen when one person decides to speak up. If you ever find yourself in a job where people disappear without explanation, where your co-workers won't meet your eyes, where the manager asks too many questions about someone you've never met, trust your instincts. Ask questions. Follow the breadcrumbs. Someone is counting on you to find the truth, even if they can't ask for help themselves. Story 5. My bedroom window that was unlocked from the outside. I'm one of those people who checks the locks before bed. Front door, back door, garage, every window on the ground floor. I do a full circuit every night, testing handles, confirming latches, making sure everything is sealed tight. Some people think it's paranoid. I think it's the bare minimum when you're a woman living alone in a house at the end of a quiet street. I bought the house 6 months ago, right after my divorce was finalized. Small Cape Cod, 2 bedrooms, a backyard that backed up to a patch of woods that the realtor called private and serene. I called it dark and slightly creepy, but the price was right and I needed somewhere that felt like mine. Somewhere my ex-husband had never set foot, never touched, never tainted with the memory of what our marriage had become. The first few months were good. I painted the walls, colors I actually liked, hung art that didn't need to be approved by committee, learned to sleep in the middle of the bed instead of clinging to my designated edge. The quiet took some getting used to, no sounds of another person breathing, moving, existing in the same space. But I grew to love it. The house felt safe. It felt like a fresh start. Then I noticed the window. It was a Thursday morning in late October, and I was running late for work. I'd overslept, skipped breakfast, was rushing through my bedroom grabbing clothes when I glanced at the window and stopped cold. The latch was undone, not broken, not forced, just open, the little metal lever pushed to the side like someone had reached up and flicked it with their finger. I stood there for a long moment, coffee going cold in my hand, trying to remember if I'd opened that window recently. I hadn't. The bedroom faced the backyard, looked out over those dark woods, and I never opened it at night. Never. The thought of that black tree line staring back at me while I slept made my skin crawl. But maybe I'd opened it during the day, to air out the room, and forgotten to lock it after. That was possible. I was still adjusting to the house, still building routines. It was easy to miss a step. I locked the window and went to work. Didn't think about it again until that night, when I did my usual circuit and found the same window unlatched again. This time, I knew I hadn't touched it. I'd locked it that morning. I remembered the click of the latch, the resistance of the old metal. But here it was, open again, the October chill seeping through the gap between the frame and the sill. I checked the window more carefully now, looked for signs of damage, scratches on the frame, anything that might explain how it had come undone. Found nothing. The window was old but intact, the latch a little loose from years of use but still functional. There was no reason it should be open, unless someone had opened it from outside. The thought made me sick. I looked out at the backyard, at the woods beyond, and imagined someone standing out there in the darkness, watching my house, waiting for me to go to sleep, then walking up to my bedroom window and reaching up to flip that little metal latch, making sure they could get in whenever they wanted. I told myself I was being ridiculous. The house was old. Maybe the latch was just faulty. Maybe vibrations from passing trucks or settling foundations could jar it loose. There were rational explanations. There had to be. I locked the window, wedged a wooden dowel in the track so it couldn't slide open even if the latch failed, and tried to convince myself the problem was solved. It wasn't. The next morning, the dowel was on the floor. The window was unlocked, and there were muddy smudges on the outside of the glass that hadn't been there before. I called the police. They sent an officer who walked around my property, checked the windows, took notes in a little spiral pad. He was polite but skeptical. No signs of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had actually been inside, just an unlocked window and some mud that could have come from anywhere. Probably just settling, he said. Old houses do funny things, but if you're concerned, you might want to look into a security system. Cameras, motion sensors, that kind of thing. He gave me a pamphlet for a local security company and left. I stood in my bedroom holding that pamphlet, looking at the window, and I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain, that settling hadn't made those muddy fingerprints on my glass. Someone had been there. Someone was testing my house, learning its vulnerabilities, figuring out how to get inside. And I was alone at the end of a quiet street, backed by woods that provided perfect cover for anyone who wanted to watch without being seen. I ordered security cameras that afternoon. Rush shipping, 2-day delivery. Spent the weekend installing them myself. One covering the backyard, one on the front porch, one pointing directly at my bedroom window from a tree about 20 feet away. If someone came back, I'd see them. I'd have proof. The first 2 nights, the footage showed nothing. Just my empty backyard, the dark line of trees, leaves skittering across the grass in the autumn wind. I started to relax. Maybe the officer had been right. Maybe the house was just settling, the latch was just old, and I was just a paranoid woman seeing threats where there weren't any. Then I reviewed the footage from night 3. The timestamp said 3:17 a.m. The backyard camera showed the usual scene, grass, trees, darkness. But at the edge of the frame, just barely visible in the infrared light, something moved. A figure, emerging from the woods, walking toward my house with slow, deliberate steps. I watched, frozen, as the figure crossed my backyard. They moved with purpose, heading straight for my bedroom window, like they'd done it 100 times before. When they reached the house, they stopped directly beneath the camera's view. I couldn't see their face. They were wearing dark clothes, a hood pulled up. But I could see their hands. They reached up toward my window, and even though there was no audio, I knew exactly what they were doing. They were unlocking it. Again. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but before I could dial, I noticed something else on the footage. Something that made me drop the phone entirely. After unlocking the window, the figure didn't leave. They slid it open, hoisted themselves up, and climbed inside, into my bedroom, while I was sleeping 10 feet away. I looked at the timestamp again. 3:17 a.m. 3 nights ago. The night before, I installed the camera on my window. The night I'd slept peacefully, dreaming about nothing, completely unaware that someone had crawled through my window and stood in my room while I lay helpless in my bed. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Because if they'd come inside 3 nights ago, if they'd been inside my house, my bedroom, feet away from where I slept. Then this wasn't just someone testing the locks anymore. They'd already been coming in, for God knows how long, and I'd never even known. I called the police again. Different officer this time, a woman named Detective Reyes, who actually listened when I showed her the footage. She watched the figure climb through my window, watched them disappear into the darkness of my bedroom, and her expression went from professional skepticism to something much more serious. "How long have you lived here?" she asked. 6 months. "And how long has the window been coming unlocked?" I thought about it, really thought, going back through the weeks and months, trying to remember when I'd first noticed. Maybe 3 months. I don't know. At first I thought I was just forgetting to lock it. I didn't start paying attention until a few weeks ago. 3 months. 3 months of someone coming into my house while I slept. 3 months of a stranger standing over my bed, doing God knows what, then slipping back out into the darkness before dawn. The thought made me want to scream, to tear the walls down, to burn the whole house to the ground and start over somewhere far away. Detective Reyes took the footage, dusted my window frame for fingerprints, and walked the perimeter of my property looking for evidence. She found a path worn through the underbrush at the edge of my yard, a trail leading from the woods directly to my bedroom window. Not an animal trail, a human one, pressed into the earth by regular use over an extended period. "Someone's been watching your house for a while," she said, and I could hear the concern beneath her professional tone. "This isn't opportunistic. This is planned, methodical. Whoever this is, they've been at this for months, maybe longer." She asked if I had anywhere else to stay. I thought about calling my sister in the city, my parents 2 states away, any of the friends I'd neglected during my failing marriage. But something stubborn in me refused. This was my house, my fresh start. I wasn't going to let some creep in a hoodie drive me out of my own home. I told Detective Reyes I'd be fine. She didn't look convinced, but she gave me her card and told me to call immediately if anything else happened. Then she left, and I was alone again with the knowledge that someone had been visiting me in the night for months. I started searching my house, really searching, not just the quick walkthrough of my nightly routine, but a deep, systematic examination of every room, every closet, every space where someone might have left evidence of their presence. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. In my dresser, buried beneath my winter sweaters, I found a photograph. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed, taken from directly above. The angle suggested someone standing right next to my pillow, looking down at my face. The timestamp in the corner said September 15th, 6 weeks ago, long before I'd noticed anything wrong with the window. My legs gave out. I sat on the floor of my bedroom holding that photograph, and I understood for the first time how completely I'd been violated. This person hadn't just been entering my house. They'd been documenting me, collecting me, taking souvenirs of their visits like trophies from a hunt. I found more the deeper I looked. A hair tie I didn't recognize wrapped around the leg of my nightstand. A small, heart-shaped stone placed on my windowsill, positioned where I'd see it every morning without realizing it didn't belong. In my bathroom, behind the mirror I never moved, a folded piece of paper with my name written on it in handwriting I didn't know. Just my name, over and over, filling the entire page. Emma, 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 like a prayer or an obsession or a promise of something to come. I called Detective Reyes, showed her everything. She bagged it all as evidence, her expression growing grimmer with each item I handed over. When I showed her the photograph, she went pale. "You need to leave," she said. "Tonight. Stay with family, stay at a hotel, I don't care. But you can't be here alone. This person is escalating. The photograph, the items, the paper with your name, they're leaving you messages. They want you to know they've been here. They want you to be afraid." "Why?" The word came out broken, barely a whisper. "Why me? What do they want?" Detective Reyes didn't answer. She didn't have to. We both knew there was only one thing a person like this wanted, and it wasn't something I would survive. I packed a bag, called my sister, told her I needed to stay for a few days without explaining why. Drove to the city that night with my doors locked and my eyes on the rearview mirror, watching for headlights that followed too long or turned when I turned. Made it to my sister's apartment around midnight and sat on her couch, shaking, while she made tea and tried to understand what was happening. I thought I'd be safe there. 3rd floor, secure building, 200 miles from the house at the end of the quiet street. There was no way he could find me here. No way he could follow me without being seen. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke to find my sister's spare bedroom window unlocked. The latch flipped to the side, exactly like my bedroom at home. Exactly like someone had reached up in the night and opened it with practiced, familiar fingers. I stood at that window, heart pounding, and I understood something terrible. He hadn't been coming to my house because of where I lived. He'd been coming because of me. He'd followed me here, tracked me across 200 miles, found my sister's apartment in a city of millions, and he'd opened that window just to let me know. There was nowhere I could run that he wouldn't find me. He wanted me to know that. Wanted me to understand that the locks didn't matter, the distance didn't matter, the police and the cameras and every precaution I could take. None of it would stop him. I was his. He'd decided that months ago, maybe longer. And now he was done waiting. I didn't tell my sister about the window. Couldn't bear to see the fear on her face, to know that I'd brought this into her home, her safe space. I just said I needed to go back, that there were things I had to take care of, that I'd call her soon. She hugged me at the door and told me to be careful, and I smiled and promised I would. And the whole time, I was calculating how far he'd followed me, how long he'd been watching, whether he was out there right now with his eyes on the building. I drove back to my house, not because I wanted to. Every instinct screamed at me to keep running, to drive until the gas ran out and then walk until my legs gave up, but because running hadn't worked. He'd found me at my sister's apartment in less than 24 hours. He'd find me anywhere I went. The only way to end this was to stop running and start fighting. Detective Reyes met me at the house. I'd called her from the road, told her what happened at my sister's place, listened to the silence on the other end of the line as she processed what it meant. When I pulled into my driveway, she was already there with 2 other officers, their cars parked at angles like they were expecting trouble. "We're going to catch him," she said, and I wanted to believe her. "We've got units watching the tree line, cameras on every approach. If he comes back tonight, we'll be ready." They set up in my living room, 3 officers rotating shifts through the night while I pretended to sleep in my bedroom. The window was locked, bolted, reinforced with a steel bar that one of the officers had brought from his own garage. Nothing was getting through that window without making enough noise to wake the entire neighborhood. I lay in the dark, listening to the murmur of voices from the living room, and I tried to feel safe. Tried to convince myself that this was the end, that he'd see the police cars and the cameras and decide I wasn't worth the trouble. But I knew better. Someone who'd spent months climbing through my window, who'd followed me 200 miles just to prove he could, wasn't going to be scared off by a few cops and some extra locks. He was patient, he was obsessed, and he was smarter than any of us had given him credit for. Nothing happened that night, or the next night, or the night after that. The police presence dwindled, first to 2 officers, then 1, then just Detective Reyes checking in every few hours. They couldn't justify the resources forever, not when there was no active threat, not when the footage from my cameras showed nothing but empty backyards and swaying trees. "Maybe he moved on," Reyes said after a week of silence. "Sometimes they do. They get spooked, find an easier target, disappear." I nodded like I believed her. I didn't. He hadn't moved on. I could feel it, that prickling awareness of being watched that had become my constant companion. He was still out there, still waiting, just biding his time until the police got bored and left me alone again. I started my own investigation. If the police couldn't find him, maybe I could. I began with my ex-husband. We hadn't ended well. He'd been controlling, jealous. The kind of man who tracked my location and read my texts and called it love. I'd left him 8 months ago, bought the house 6 months ago, and the timeline fit. But when I dug into his whereabouts, I found alibis for almost every night in question. Work trips, social media posts, credit card receipts placing him hundreds of miles away when the figure on my camera was climbing through my window. It wasn't him. I moved on to neighbors, co-workers, anyone who might have developed an unhealthy interest in my life. Spent hours scrolling through social media, looking for comments that felt too familiar, messages that crossed lines. Found nothing. Whoever was doing this hadn't left a digital trail. No threatening emails, no anonymous accounts following my profiles, no evidence that they existed anywhere except in my backyard at 3 a.m. Then I thought about the house, about who had lived here before me, who had access, who might have known about that window and its faulty latch. The previous owner was a man named Gerald Weston. He'd died 6 months before I bought the place, heart attack according to the records, and the house had sat empty until his estate sold it to me. I'd never thought much about him, never wondered who had slept in my bedroom before me, or what kind of life he'd lived between these walls. I looked him up, found an obituary that described him as a quiet man who kept to himself, found property records showing he'd owned the house for 37 years, found a single photograph in a local newspaper archive, a grainy image of a man in his 60s accepting an award for volunteer work at the community center. And I found something else. A news article from 1989, buried deep in the archives of a paper that didn't exist anymore, describing the disappearance of a young woman named Catherine Hollis. She'd lived 3 streets over from the house I now owned. She'd vanished one October night and was never seen again. The police had questioned several neighbors, including a 32-year-old man named Gerald Weston, but no arrests were ever made. The article included a photograph of Catherine Young, pretty, dark hair like mine. She was smiling at the camera with the easy confidence of someone who didn't know what was coming. I stared at that photograph for a long time. Then I looked up from my laptop, across my bedroom, at the window that someone had been opening for months. The window in a house that had belonged to Gerald Weston. The window that looked out over the same dark woods where a woman had disappeared 35 years ago. Gerald Weston was dead. I'd seen the death certificate, the obituary, the records of his estate sale. He couldn't be the one climbing through my window. But what if he'd taught someone else? What if the obsession had been passed down, inherited like the house itself, carried on by someone who'd learned from a master? I went back to the obituary, read it more carefully this time. Gerald Weston, survived by his nephew, sole beneficiary of his estate. A nephew I'd never met. A nephew who'd inherited everything, including maybe a set of skills and desires that normal people couldn't imagine. I searched for the nephew's name, found an address, found a photograph, and I recognized him. He worked at the hardware store where I'd bought the locks for my windows. He'd helped me pick them out, had smiled and made small talk while I explained that I was trying to secure an old house. He'd recommended the steel bar that one of the officers had later reinforced my window with. He'd sold me locks he already knew how to defeat. I was looking at his face when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You found me." Now the game gets interesting. The lights in my house went out. I didn't scream, didn't freeze. Some part of me had been waiting for this moment since I'd first found that window unlocked. And now that it was here, my body knew what to do before my mind caught up. I grabbed my phone and ran. Not toward the front door, too far, too exposed. And he'd expect that. Instead, I went for the bathroom at the end of the hall, the one with the lock that actually worked, and the small window that led to the side yard. I'd mapped my escape routes weeks ago, lying awake at night imagining exactly this scenario. Now I moved through the darkness on muscle memory, counting doorways, trailing my hand along the wall. I made it to the bathroom, slammed the door, twisted the lock. My fingers were already dialing 911 when I heard him in the hallway. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, not even trying to be quiet anymore. He knew where I was. He'd probably known where I was every second of every day since I'd moved into this house. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's in my house. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I'm locked in the bathroom. He's in the hallway. Please hurry. Ma'am, I'm dispatching units now. Stay on the line with me. Can you tell me? The bathroom door shuddered. He was pushing against it, testing the lock. That same patient, methodical approach he'd used on my window for months. Push, pause, push, like he had all the time in the world. He's trying to get in, I said into the phone. Please hurry. I could hear the 911 operator talking, could hear her saying units were on the way, 4 minutes out, just hold on. But 4 minutes was forever when someone was trying to break down your door. 4 minutes was enough time to die 100 different ways. The pushing stopped. Silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. I stood in the darkness of my bathroom, phone pressed to my ear, listening for any sound that would tell me where he was, what he was doing. Then his voice came through the door, calm and conversational, like we were old friends catching up over coffee. You know, my uncle talked about you. Not you specifically, but women like you. Strong ones. The ones who check their locks and install cameras and think they can keep the wolves out. He laughed softly. He said those were the best ones, the ones worth waiting for. I didn't respond, pressed myself against the far wall, as far from the door as I could get, and prayed the police would arrive in time. Catherine was like that. Fought him for almost an hour before he finally got her quiet. He used to tell me that story when I was young, like a bedtime fairy tale. The princess in the house at the edge of the woods, and the wolf who came through her window. The doorknob rattled. I've been waiting my whole life to have a story like that. And then you moved in, right into his house, like it was meant to be. The window. I'd forgotten about the window, the small one above the toilet that led to the side yard. It was narrow, barely big enough to squeeze through, but I was small and desperate and willing to dislocate a shoulder if that's what it took. I climbed onto the toilet, keeping my phone wedged between my ear and shoulder, and reached for the latch. Stuck. Of course it was stuck. Nothing in this goddamn house worked the way it was supposed to. The police are coming, I said, loud enough for him to hear through the door. They'll be here any minute. If you leave now, maybe you get away. But if you're still here when they arrive, I'm not leaving. His voice had changed, harder now, that pleasant conversational tone giving way to something colder. I've waited too long for this, watched you for too long. Do you know how hard it is to be patient, to come into your room night after night and not touch you? To stand there watching you sleep, close enough to feel your breath and walk away every single time. The latch gave way. I shoved the window open, cold October air rushing in, and started to pull myself through. My hips caught on the frame, the edges biting into my skin, but I pushed harder, wiggled, felt something tear as I forced my way through. Behind me, the bathroom door exploded inward. I didn't look back, just pulled myself through the window, fell hard onto the grass below, and ran. Across the side yard, around the front of the house, into the street where I could see headlights approaching. Red and blue lights finally the police. I was waving my arms, screaming, when I heard him behind me. He'd come out the front door, had circled around, was running across the lawn toward me with something in his hand that caught the light from the approaching cars. A knife, long and thin, the kind you'd use to gut a deer. The first police car skidded to a stop between us. An officer was out before it finished moving, gun drawn, shouting commands I couldn't process through the roar of blood in my ears. More cars behind him, more officers, more guns pointed at the man who'd been climbing through my window for months. He stopped, stood there in the middle of my lawn, knife still in his hand, and he looked at me past all those officers with their weapons and their shouting and their flashing lights. Looked at me like none of it mattered, like we were the only two people in the world. "This isn't over," he said. Quiet, just for me, his lips barely moving. "You're mine. You've always been mine. and I'll wait as long as I have to." Then he dropped the knife and put his hands up, and the officers swarmed him, and I stood in the street shaking so hard I couldn't stay upright. Someone caught me before I fell, Detective Reyes, arriving in an unmarked car, pulling me into her arms while I sobbed against her shoulder. "You're safe," she kept saying. "It's over. You're safe now." I wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that the handcuffs on his wrists and the cage they'd put him in would be enough to keep him away from me forever. But I'd seen the look in his eyes, that patient, hungry certainty, and I knew he meant every word. His name was Thomas Weston, 34 years old, unmarried, no criminal record before that night. By all outward appearances, he was exactly what he seemed, a quiet man who worked at the hardware store, lived alone in a small apartment across town, and kept to himself. The kind of person you'd pass on the street without a second glance, which was exactly the point. The police searched his apartment and found a shrine. That's the word Detective Reyes used when she told me about it, her voice careful and clinical, like she was trying to cushion the blow. A shrine dedicated to me, photographs covering an entire wall, taken over 6 months of watching. Me at the grocery store, at the gas station, walking to my car after work. Me through my bedroom window, asleep and vulnerable, unaware that I was being collected like specimens in a jar. There were journals too, filled with the same obsessive repetition I'd found on that paper behind my bathroom mirror. My name, my schedule, my habits. Pages and pages of observations written in handwriting so precise it looked almost mechanical. But the worst part wasn't the shrine to me. The worst part was what they found in his uncle's old workshop, in a shed behind the property I now own. Catherine Hollis was there. What was left of her, after 35 years in a sealed container buried beneath the concrete floor. So were 2 other women whose disappearances had never been connected. One from 1994, one from 2003, both matching the same pattern. Young women who lived alone. Windows that came unlocked in the night. Vanished without a trace, their cases going cold because no one had ever thought to look in the quiet man's workshop. Gerald Weston had taught his nephew well. The patience, the planning, the slow escalation from watching to entering to finally taking what he believed was his. It was all there in Thomas's journals, passed down like a family trade. He'd been waiting for the right woman to move into his uncle's house, the house he'd grown up visiting, the house where he'd learned what kind of monster he wanted to become. When I showed up, freshly divorced and desperate for a fresh start, it must have felt like fate. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I testified on the 3rd day, sat in that witness box, and described every unlocked window, every photograph, every night I'd slept 10 feet away from a man who was deciding when to stop waiting. Thomas watched me the whole time with that same patient expression, that same certainty that this was just a temporary setback. The handcuffs and the guards and the bars of his cell, none of it seemed to register as permanent. He looked at me like we both knew I'd be seeing him again. The jury convicted him on charges of stalking, breaking and entering, and attempted kidnapping. The evidence from his uncle's workshop added 3 counts of accessory after the fact, though the statute of limitations meant Gerald Weston's actual crimes would never be prosecuted. Thomas got 47 years. No possibility of parole until he was 81 years old. 47 years should have felt like victory, should have felt like safety, like closure, like the end of a nightmare that had consumed 6 months of my life. Instead, it felt like a countdown. 47 years until he got out. 47 years until he could start watching again, waiting again, planning how to finish what he'd started. I sold the house. Couldn't stay there. Couldn't sleep in a bedroom where a monster had stood over me night after night. Couldn't look at those woods without imagining figures moving between the trees. The new owners don't know what happened there. The realtor was careful to disclose only what was legally required, and apparently the nightmares of the previous occupant didn't make the list. Sometimes I wonder if I should have told them. Sometimes I wonder if it would have made any difference. I live in the city now, in an apartment on the 14th floor of a building with a doorman and security cameras and locks that require a key card and a code. There's no window someone could climb through, no woods where someone could hide, no darkness pressing against the glass while I try to sleep. By every objective measure, I am safe. But I don't feel safe. Haven't felt safe since that first morning when I found the latch undone and told myself it was nothing. The fear lives in my body now, embedded in my nervous system, triggered by sounds I can't identify and shadows that move wrong and the particular quality of silence that comes at 3 a.m. when the rest of the world is asleep. I still check my locks every night. Front door, back door, every window in the apartment. I check them twice, 3 times, until I'm certain they're secure. Then I lie in bed and I listen, waiting for the click of a latch, the whisper of a window sliding open, the soft footsteps of someone who's learned to move without being heard. Detective Reyes calls me sometimes. Just to check in, she says. But I know she's really making sure I'm still here. Still alive. Still fighting the urge to disappear the way Catherine Hollis disappeared. The way those other women disappeared, swallowed by their fear until there was nothing left. I won't let that happen. Won't let Thomas Weston take anything else from me. Not my sanity, not my independence, not the life I'm still trying to build from the wreckage of the one he destroyed. I go to therapy twice a week and I take medication that helps me sleep, and I force myself to leave the apartment even when every instinct screams at me to stay hidden. I'm healing, slowly, in ways that don't always feel like progress, but apparently are. Last month, I got a letter. No return address, postmarked from the state correctional facility where Thomas is serving his sentence. I didn't open it, just handed it to Detective Reyes and watched her face go tight as she read whatever was inside. She wouldn't tell me what it said, told me it was better if I didn't know, that she'd handle it, that he was just trying to scare me and I shouldn't give him the satisfaction. But I saw the way her hands shook when she put the letter in an evidence bag. Saw the way she looked at me afterward, like she was calculating how much more I could take before I broke completely. He's still thinking about me, still planning, still waiting for his 47 years to run out so he can come find me again. Some nights, when the fear is worst and the silence is loudest and sleep feels like a vulnerability I can't afford, I wonder if I'll spend the rest of my life this way. Checking locks, watching shadows, listening for the sound of a window that opens when it shouldn't. Then I remember that I survived, that I fought back, that when he came through that door with a knife in his hand, I didn't freeze. I ran, and I screamed, and I lived to see him dragged away in handcuffs. He wanted me to be a story like Catherine, a fairy tale for the next monster in the family, passed down like an inheritance of horrors. Instead, I'm the one who got away. And every morning I wake up in my locked apartment, 14 floors above a city that never stops moving. I remind myself that getting away was enough. It has to be enough. Even if I never stop checking the windows, even if I never stop listening for footsteps in the dark,